Good evening and welcome everyone to the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee meeting of Tuesday, April the 13th. Welcome all of our guests. I would just like to remind anyone who is not a guest or a member of the committee, counselors, if you could just take yourself off video, please, and ensure you're muted for the meeting. Thank you. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Can wave wildly or put your hand up with the raised hand. No, seeing none. So I have approval of the agenda. We've had a request to change 2 items. I think for the to assist with the item on the urban design review for Century Condos, we're going to move the correspondence from 7A up following the delegations after 4B so that we can hear the delegations and then have the review of the report, and then members can ask questions of the 2 delegates. We're also going to move up the verbal update designation plaque design 53 Ontario Street from 5D to following 5B, which is the verbal update on the designation and Grimsby Remembers plaques. Is that all that we need to do, Bianca, from your end for moving?
Yes, Chair Rothwell, thank you.
So I have those 2 amendments to the agenda. Any other amendments or to the agenda from anyone? So I have a motion to resolve that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee agenda as amended.
I actually have an amendment.
Do we have a hand up? Oh,
I do. Sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead, Kate.
I just wanted to, before we move forward, I noticed something at the last meeting. At the end of the last meeting, I noticed that new business was off the agenda, and I went back and I found out that the last time we had new business on our agenda was the October meeting. And, well, the first time we didn't have it was on the November 19th meeting, and I had new business last time. So I just wanted to know if there was a reason. I've looked at I've looked at the Green Committee, I've looked at the Art Gallery, I've looked at other committees, and they still have new business. Maybe it's just fallen off.
So I think what we can do is, I was mentioning we can add announcements as well. So that's a forum for members who might want to just bring something to the attention of the committee that's of interest to the community. So I think I'll ask the clerk at tonight's meeting if we can add announcements and new business as well, following announcements. I'm not sure if that would be the order, but we will add those 2 items and on tonight's as an amendment to the agenda as well. Is that okay with you, clerk? Good with that?
Through the chair, that's fine. You can add announcements, no problem. And the announcements are made for the purpose of informing other members and general public of items of interest or any type of exceptional events.
So Kate, would announcements serve what you're thinking of? And then or do we need new business as well?
The new business traditionally is what was just mentioned, to let the committees know of anything we've been working on, let the public know. I don't foresee any reason other than having announcements because it's virtually exactly what we were calling.
Okay, thank you. So what we'll do is we'll add announcements tonight to the agenda, and if we find that meets our needs, then we'll leave that. And if we feel we need to add new business, we can do that at a later date. So I think for tonight's agenda, those are the changes that have been brought forward. So resolve that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee agenda as amended, dated April 13th, 2021 be approved. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? So I have moved by Anne, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is delegations, and we'd like to welcome Gordon Stratford from to speak on the urban design review for Century Condos. Welcome, Gordon.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think before Gordon starts, I'll say a quick introduction into what we're going to be talking about and just share a bit what's been happening behind the scenes. So as a team, we're excited to share the results of the town's first urban design review panel, or charrette. And I wanted to take an opportunity to thank Gordon for working with the town and the applicant and his entire team for being very supportive and collaborative with our new initiative, and as well as our regional colleagues who have been very supportive. They've lent us their expertise and have participated throughout the entirety of the process, as well as Marcus Letourneau and a member of his team have also made their contributions to what the presentation that you're going to see tonight and the results that have unfolded from that. We're very excited again because it's been an interactive series of sessions. It's been very collaborative and the process has been, I think, very fruitful. And we're excited to share the results with the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee tonight and then eventually Council. So with no further ado, I also wanted to provide a background to a little bit about Gordon. So Mr. Stratford is OAA registered architect since 1984. He's both an architect and urban designer. He's worked on projects across Canada and around the world. His work includes focus on creating and evolving communities at the building, neighborhood, municipal, and regional scales. He's involved in 2 urban design review panels for the City of Toronto since 2007 and Niagara-on-the-Lake. All of this gives him a good perspective on growth and change in the Golden Horseshoe and an appreciation of the changes that are happening in Niagara region. He's also been involved in the recent Niagara Region Biennial Awards Initiative, and we're very excited to have him present tonight. So with that, I'll pass it on to Mr. Stratford to deliver his presentation.
Thank you very much, Antonietta. Just give me a second here to get started. And okay, so everybody should see on their screens the title Century Condo Project Heritage Advisory Committee Meeting, April 13th. Each page or slide is numbered, so when it comes to any questions or comments at the end of the delegations, I'd be happy to go back to any particular pages. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity to share with you tonight some of the work that we have done collaboratively, as Antonietta has mentioned, with DeSantis and with other members of both Niagara Region and the town of Grimsby, as we worked with the developer to move their design, their initial design, which you see on the left-hand side of this screen. It should be slide number 2, and move through from early February of this year to late March, a series of sessions. And as Antonietta mentioned, an iterative process that led us to where we came up with the design that you currently see on the right-hand side of the screen. So in terms of how we got from early February to late March, as was mentioned, we took a very collaborative approach, and it was used through a series of virtual sessions and an iterative process. So there would be presentations, we would analyze them, have a look at them, make markups, make suggestions, come back again, and do that sort of circular motion through a series of work sessions. And in addition to the DeSantis team, the town of Grimsby and Niagara Region, there were also the town of Grimsby consultants, of which I'm one. And it started back in early February when I became involved, and the drawings that you see right now, this should be slide number 3, were part of the package that had sort of first come my way relative to a Main Street view on the left and a view from Doran Avenue on the right-hand side of the screen. And what we did when the package arrived, and this included not only views, but also included some elevations, some plans. The plans are very diagrammatic, so it really very much was a work in motion that we were looking at. And so what we did is we moved into a whole sort of approach to looking at the context. So what I would typically do is I would look at the site as you see it on the right-hand side. In this particular case, try to get a really good handle on the context, so that with every design move, we'd always look more broadly beyond the site, just to say, okay, if this is happening, how does it impact the rest of this street? And we paid a lot of attention to the Main Street facade, the frontage, because of the heritage of downtown Grimsby. And so this very, very rough and ready sort of montage that you see on the screen was a very valuable thing for us, and I'll return to it as we go through this series of slides. And just to let you know, most all of the images that you're seeing tonight were part and parcel of the process that we went through. So you're seeing the things, the tools that we actually shared with the various people who are part of the overall collaborative team. And what we were doing as we were looking at the street, certainly looking at the history of the street, but looking also at the pattern from an urban design point of view. So the slide that should be on the screen right now is number 6. And across the top, you see the panoramic sort of view. And it was sort of keeping track not only of the little details about the heritage of the downtown, but also the bigger pieces, and that is the cadence of the frontages of the buildings. And I'll come back to that in a second, right down to the types of windows, the window profiles. In some cases, the DeSantis team had already gotten to that point. You'll see as we move in further that they'd already started to pick up on some of this, the color of the brick, the variations and things of that nature. As well, there should be slide 7 now. Across the top, you'll see a 1977 view down Main Street in town of Grimsby, and then across the bottom, 3 black and white images. And what we were trying to do is we were trying to sort of get a handle on the context, was also the past context. And with the help of the town of Grimsby, we were sort of digging in terms of trying to find some information. So if I go across the bottom on the left-hand side, over to the right, and I'll start on the left first, 1973 images, and Betty Mick's shop, which is on part of the site, on the west side of the site, and then in the middle, the Roxy Theater. And if you want to know what was playing in 1973, Charles Bronson, the Valachi Papers, which I never saw. And the intent behind it was to see if there was, there's always history, and some of it is history that you remember in different ways, and sometimes you remember it through built form. And we think that, well, I'll come back to the Roxy Theater in a few minutes, but we wanted to keep track of that, not so much for the way the building looked, but for what it would represent to the community. And then finally, on the right-hand side, the house that you see is still existing and used for office purposes. And our research sort of led us to think that, in the history of Grimsby, there was probably an edge of the downtown, so the traditional downtown, and then it started to transfer into residential. And our sense from looking at some of these images is that this was a transfer point, and that what we're trying to do with this new building is extend the notion or the character and the presence of downtown. And I'll come back to that as well. So what we did is we circled back to the broader context. We looked at the site itself, and what you'll start to see, and you should be on slide 8, is sort of a ghosted image of what had been submitted in early February. And what I was trying to do is I was trying to see how this building behaved, because we were really concerned about creating a really nice street frontage. And the height of this building is different. This is a hybrid that has not been seen that much in Grimsby, and certainly not as much in the downtown area. And what we were trying to see is how to really create a really strong street frontage, but that was in keeping with the scale of the existing street frontages. And so the diagrams that you're seeing popping up right now is just me looking at it and just sort of analyzing the front of the building. Because as I click, and as I go through this, there's a fair amount of symmetry that's in this particular facade. And certainly symmetry exists elsewhere along the main street, but what was really something we were paying attention to was perhaps there was too much. Maybe it was reading more as an entire building as opposed to a street frontage, which had a very quiet 3rd and 4th floor, and the main building sort of existing in the background. The other thing that we were looking at too, and I'll just run my cursor, is the fact that the building, there was street frontage, but then it would sort of die down at each end of the site. And that's not quite the way the downtown behaves as it has urbanized. And so we wanted to come back to that as well. And then of course, there seemed to be a lot of symmetry. And symmetry is not bad, but it was starting to make this building feel perhaps bigger than it needed to. So what we started to do was we started to look at response to context. And to do that, this is where the montage, the sort of street frontage comes in. And what I started to do is I started to look, and I just happened to pick some buildings that were immediately to the west of the site, but looking at the patterns of how big the buildings were when they were first built, and sort of looking at that and saying, okay, there's the beginning of a scale that perhaps can start to make its way into the new building. It's not necessarily to replicate, it's more to give a nod to, an acknowledgement of, and be assimilated by the existing context. And this was quite different if I go backwards, because this was starting to anchor as a full, 2-story street building, the edge of the site, as opposed to it dying on the east and the west and sort of working its way down. The next building I looked at, and again, there were many of these, this type of size of building along Main Street, and that was again trying to look at how we could start repeating some of these these moves or these massing sort of collections that were occurring along Main Street. And in this case, what we tried to do immediately was to try to take this building off of symmetry. And then the interesting thing too was that the last white box that I'm showing here is slightly set back from the street. And so there was a desire to create a patio or a terrace in front of what could possibly be a restaurant or a cafe on the western edge of the site. So again, we were looking for those clues, sort of doing a little bit of an archaeological dig to see what would happen. And then the entry into the residential building itself would then become sort of a gap in between buildings that were establishing a very strong street frontage. And then the building behind would, sorry about that, the building behind would just sort of quietly, lightly live its life without having a negative impact on the main street itself. Now, on page 10, what you're starting to see are some of the tools that we were using to communicate with the design, the development team, sorry. And what I'll do is as I look at a place, I'll do sketches. And I was looking at on the left-hand side, the way the building looked at the time, and just starting to think about things like how to continue the street edge along Main Street, and just running my cursor. If I come down to here where my cursor is, how to turn the building around the corner. And certainly the development team was doing some of that, but when we were looking at this building, it was not only just the flat facade along Main Street, it was what happens when you're coming sort of diagonally down Main Street from the east or west? How much of the rest of the building do you see? And I'm going to come back to that in a second as well. And then the top right-hand corner of the sketch was the beginnings of starting to see how the facade, the punched window openings could start to evolve. And this was a means of being able to very quickly share ideas in a collaborative way. On to page 11, again, you'll see the view as of early February on the left, and then more sketches. And this was the beginning of having a conversation with the development team about what the upper floors might be able to do. As you see on the left-hand side, there are a lot of windows. And there are a lot of the skyline of the building, the top of the building, there's a lot of up and down through it. And we were finding, and I was finding it too, that when you look at the building, your eye kind of goes up towards the top of the building. And what we'd really like to do is to just get it to be there. You know, people would love to live in downtown Grimsby, but to get that building to calm down. And you'll see that becoming a recurring theme. And some of it occurs in the sketches on the right. Also, what was starting to look at in this, once we started to provide some feedback in terms of how we could really start to extend the street frontage along Main Street and sort of create that cadence, but not have necessarily a symmetrical situation. And it was a matter, as I'm clicking here, you'll start to see some of the window patterns started to emerge. And it was part of our conversation with the development team and their architect in terms of enhancing what they had already started to do in terms of the window sizes and the window types. We're very much picking up on some of the characteristics of the heritage of Main Street. But this was also our start to be able to, in this particular diagram, to start to group together window openings on the upper floor to create fewer openings and calm the top of the building down. So we felt that was really important, even if that wasn't distinctly part of the heritage of the downtown. Now, at the same time, and I'll just share with you, we were looking at the building on the round, and the Doran Avenue character on the north side of the site was something we were paying attention to as well. And what we started to do, and I'm moving on to what should be slide 14, is in a very simple way, what we're trying to do is create montages that would try to put the existing context into the picture relative to the buildings, because the elevations that were being provided were all on their own. There was very little information about how this actually fit into the bigger context. And I think that's one of the takeaways from a presentation like this, is that any development that comes before the town, there should be a full acknowledgement of and an inclusion of context in the drawings that are submitted. So in this case, what we're trying to do is trying to see, okay, there's 4 stories at the back, at the north end, and how do you get that building, which is unlike any of the other buildings on Doran, to start to acknowledge and have a nod to the existing houses next to it. And this sketch that you see, and this should be page 15, starts to show a little bit of that, how to step it down. We had a conversation about that. The developer had very particular goals in terms of how many units they wanted to achieve. So, and then along the way, between early February and late March, they changed how the top of the building was going to work. So they were starting to head in the right direction. At the same time, back to slide number 16, you'll see on the right-hand side that we were talking to the developer about brick color. And there is variation in downtown Grimsby. Sometimes it's variations of red, sometimes it's very subtle, but it's really important because it sort of creates that kind of nice built culture weave of the downtown. So we wanted to make sure that the developer was starting to acknowledge that. And these colors that are on the right-hand side are not the colors, but it was a diagram conversation about, this is what you need to do in order to really make the bottom of the building, the first 2 floors, feel like it's part of the street. You're walking by and it's as if downtown had naturally extended itself to the east. At the same time, we were looking at the sides of the building. So on page number 7 or slide 7 now, at the top, you'll see the elevation as it had been given to us in early February. It's a big building. It's a desirable thing to have a lot of people live downtown. I mean, it's a very good story. And how do you get this building to fit in? Because as I click, the yellow that you see on the facade is really how much of it you would see as a member of the public, whether you're walking down Main Street or driving or biking, and the same on Doran. So we were asking the developer to really pay attention to that as well. And what we started to do on the bottom that's just come onto the screen is, again, and I'll just run my cursor, the sort of reddish color that you see is really getting a serious wraparound of the brick onto in this case, the east facade of the building. And trying to find a way of grouping windows and putting in balconies such that this building just sort of settled down and became light colored and just sort of worked its way into the center of the block. And then on the bottom elevation, as I run my cursor, again, at the time, what we were trying to do is trying to break down that mass towards the Dorn side. At the same time, and I'm just trying to give you a complete picture, some of these things are heritage and some of them are not, but it's all about how this fits into the downtown. And every project becomes a precedent for the future. So this is something for us to pay attention to. The sketch on the left was really trying to figure out, okay, you've got these new units. People are going to find Grimsby very desirable. How do you get them to be good neighbors? And so at the time we were talking with the developer, and I'm just running my cursor over a sketch that talks about trying to get some landscape into this, what was the western face of the building, and try to protect the views from the existing neighbor to the new neighbors and vice versa. And so that was something that was running parallel as well. And you see on the right-hand side, we were using these kind of diagrams to very clearly identify to the development team what we were after. So by the time we moved to the middle of February, we had given feedback and the development team had done design, and then they came back, and the image on the right is their next move in terms of what's happening. Now, the big changes that you'll see right away is that if you look on the image on the right-hand side, and this should be slide 19, you'll see right away that the eastern, I'll call it street building, is much longer than it was on the early February version. So we're starting to create some very strong edges that will allow this development to, in turn, in the future, carry forward, other developments adjacent to the property, that nice, strong, well knit together street wall. And then also what we're trying to do on the west side, where you see in the early image where I'm running my cursor, we felt that the background building was starting to play too big a role in the foreground on the street, and that this building was too low. So we said, keep the 2 stories here, build it up, and they started to do that. And we'll come in a few minutes to what happens to the top of the building. So what we did is we looked at this, and we took these images, and what we did in this particular case, and I'll just go back for a second, page or slide 20, they did a couple of options. They did this option, which was much more solid, and then they did this one, which is, I'll call it option B, which was much more glassy. And we decided, through conversation with the developer, that perhaps that this was too much of a difference from what was happening on street level, that they could work with a building that had more solid to it. And there's a good sustainability story to this as well. And we went back to this one and we looked at this one in depth. And what we started to do, and I'm just going to click back and forth, this is what was given to us, and this is what we started to do. And if you look at the top of the building, what we're trying to do is take a series of moves to quieten down the building, step by step by step. So where there were a lot of juts up and down on the top of the building, and this is a working image that you're seeing here, slide 23. So not the entire building has the same effect. It's not because we wanted it to look that way, but if I take the tower where my cursor is and go to the left, you'll see right away we tried to create a very calming sort of parapet or cornice line at the top of the building. We started grouping some of the windows together to simplify that background building and really go with the very light colors. So all the attention is paid to the good stuff that happens in the first 2 floors, which is all about street building, all about downtown. Also, what we were doing, you'll notice if I take my cursor to here for a second, what we wanted to try to do, and I'll go forward again, look in that same area, you'll see we're trying to emphasize to the developer to use punched windows. That's what the downtown heritage, the older buildings are all about. And at the same time, if there were going to be balconies in these upper floors here, the second floor, that they not be a big continuous balcony like you see here, but actually be broken up. So you'd actually feel more of the window modules. So these are all very tiny steps, but they all add up to what we were hoping was something that would work really well. And then we added notes about it. And I won't go into the notes, but again, we just wanted to show you how we were communicating back and forth. We knew that, and this is going from Grimsby to New York City, and then we'll go back to Grimsby, but we knew that the developer that their inspiration was the Park Plaza Hotel in New York City, which is quite a bit different. But we thought that we'd spend a little bit of time and look at its context and try to see whether there were some cues there. And this became our opening for being able to talk about, well, this is a big building, but by the time you get to the upper floors, it's very quiet, very calm. You can do the same thing for your upper floors in Grimsby. So that became our opening. If we look to the context that they were thinking about, then we could start a conversation about how to calm down the top stories of the building. At the same time, taking a little bit of New York, they were very enamored on a very large scale, the entry into the Plaza Hotel itself. And we said, if this is the image on the left-hand side that what they gave us, then this sketch is a rough look at how to make it a bit more solid, a bit more enclosed, announce the entry, make it feel like it could very easily be part of the Grimsby streetscape, and use a darker material so that your eyes go to the buildings that have the red brick and the ornamentation that I'm pointing to right now, and just get it to be a quiet part of the residential building. So by the time we reached early March, we'd given all that information back in mid-February, and they came back, the development team came back with the image that you see on the right-hand side. So again, you're starting to see some of the things making their way through. I'll just sort of run my cursor along the fairly sort of jagged skyline that occurs in the mid-February, and by the time we reach the end of March, we're starting to see some real moves towards very, very calm, kind of simple sort of approach. And they continue to sort of develop how things would work on the street building. You can see that some of the things that we were talking about had not been done. We're assuming that as you go into SPA and the development process the town goes through, that there could still be some things to catch up on and go forward with the developer, but just wanted to let you know where things stand and the things that we were pressing for in terms of the design of the building. The one thing we were paying a lot of attention to was in this view was just where I'm circling my cursor, was that they had decided to start experimenting with what would happen if we put brick elsewhere on the big building. And that was something we paid a fair amount of attention to. Again, this gives you a bit of a sense of some of the things that we were giving them notes back to about. And one of them was, if you're going to use brick, it really belongs to the character and the language of Main Street, the first 2 floors. If you start adding it into the main building, which is quite a bit, it's a different size building, that may detract from all the goodness that you've tried to put into this. And so that was one of the comments we came back with, and I'll come back to that in a second. You'll also start to see in this image, as I run my cursor, that they are starting to get into the different brick colors. And we found that we needed some more information on this particular brick type. But we felt that there was a good thing if they weren't all alike, because then as you walk by, you begin to think that these are all individual buildings. And again, it's another cue that makes it feel like it's part of the downtown. And then also we came back to, once again, and this was towards the end of March, that we really wanted to try to make sure that this building, the Bistro building, as they've called it, had that same kind of punched opening. So there's work in progress that needs to happen as we move forward. The thing I wanted to share with you as well is in this particular late March was these were the elevations. So this is the elevation along Main Street. And this is the one along Doran. So we picked up on this very quickly because all the efforts to try to sort of calm the building down, move it into the background. And in this case, say, if you're going to have something that's going to be brick, make it this because it has a size somewhat similar to the house next door to it. This was starting to take away from all of that work to try to calm this building down and to get it just sort of to fit lightly into its context. So that was a comment that we sent back. And then also what was starting to happen was that they were considering sort of a dark tinted glazed balcony railing. And again, we felt that that was drawing too much attention to some vertical elements in the building where you really wanted this building to just sort of fit into the middle of the block. And so we made comments back on that as well. And you'll notice on this particular slide, slide 32, again, they were trying to use brick again. And if you remember the elevation and the yellow on it that I'd shown earlier, this would be very visible from the street. And again, we felt that it was from an urban design point of view, confusing, and that really there should be some simplicity and really put your efforts into making sure that people clearly saw the street buildings and that notion of Main Street in Grimsby. And all these comments that you see were comments that were sent back. The red boxes, I'll just sort of put my cursor on them just for a moment. These were the areas where we said you need to have more wraparound of the brick. And this happens to be on the east side. So you do see it as you come up and down Main Street. And likewise on the west side. And one of the things that we were thinking about when we go back to the Roxy Theatre for a second, one thought was that if the building itself wasn't replicated and we weren't sure that it should be that in that site, that that there be some celebration of the Roxy Theatre inside the entry into the residential building itself on Main Street. So that was one suggestion that we made. And then another suggestion is that where I'm running my cursor right now, there will be a lot of public activity along here because there's parking in the middle of the block. And people will walk back and forth up this incline towards Main Street in order to gain access to the services that are available on Main Street. So we thought that this might also be a very good place where commemoration of some of the heritage of the site and its surroundings could come into close contact with the members of the public, members of the community. In addition to all the effort that was being made, which we felt was the biggest thing of all, and that was to sort of try to continue that street character. And also what we were trying to encourage, which the developer was hesitant about, was in some cases we felt that using a Juliet balcony would be appropriate. And that's an interesting thing because it brings us right fully into the pandemic. And one of the key trends that's happening now is that everybody wants a place with at least a balcony they can sit on. The access to and privacy to fresh air and view is extremely important. So we'll see how the use of Juliets might come into this project. We recommended it in places where we felt that it would give the building a little bit more breathing room by not having a projecting balcony. And again, we added notes about the project itself. One of the notes that we added, just to let you know as well, and I don't think we've seen the landscape plan yet, but this is the west side of the building, and what you see that I'm circling right now is where there is structured parking. So the good thing is that parking is off the street. The thing is that this is open, and it's open for ventilation into the parking area. And so our recommendations when we see the landscape plan is how landscape can be used to screen the view towards cars and also provide a pleasant visual buffer, both for neighbors and for the people living in the new building. So by the time we reached late March, the image that you see on the left-hand side, we're on slide 36, is the latest image that the last few slides, and just show you what is in the presentation. My apologies, I'm getting an unstable internet access note, so if you can't hear me, just raise your hands. I'm almost finished. And so you can see sort of the culmination of some of the things that we've been able to talk about, each piece, small piece on its own, starting to take us from a project that was fairly visually active to one that is calmer and with a street building that is reinforced. And the best way to do this was to look at the images that we had received in early March in terms of the elevations on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, the elevations that we currently have as of the end of March. I'll use the bottom one where you had the brick towers that we were concerned about, and they have taken that to heart. The main body of the building, the part in the middle, is going to be a light color. It's going to be fairly calm. Your eye will tend to go towards the parts that have brick, certainly on Main Street and then also on Doran Avenue. And then also, again, in this particular case, the east elevation, early part of March. The bottom one is later in March, and you can start to see the grouping of windows, more simplicity with the balconies, a light color being used, the brick being carried around from Main Street onto the east side of the building. And then onto the west elevation, and again, early March at the top, and then towards the end of March on the bottom, you can see some of the changes. And I'll just sort of cite as an example where the brick is carried around, where my cursor is running right now, whereas before they were sort of heading into a territory where perhaps it was going to become visually confusing relative to carrying brick further than we're showing on the bottom elevation. And so this image, page or slide 40, shows what we started off with at the very beginning, one of the early diagrams. And then this, and again, it is a rough approximation. It is not scientific. The intent behind that is to just see how this development behaves by the end of March in terms of the way the building looks. And again, I'll just sort of go over the main points. We now have a street front where it used to be very symmetrical along the street. Now it is not. We have a longer facade here. We have a slightly shorter one here. We're picking up on some of the cadence of the facade presence and sizes that are on adjacent buildings in the downtown, and there are other examples of it as you get further downtown. We have some setback here for a very nice street amenity in terms of a terrace, but it also has a precedent, not only here, but elsewhere to the west of buildings that have pushed back from the street. The height is in keeping. You can see that there's been a sort of a striking of a height that is familiar to the heritage of downtown and Main Street. The use of the brick, the use of the windows, an entry into the residential building that fits into the scale of the street. And then the upper two floors that you see would be fairly light in color, much more simpler than they were originally, a very calming sort of cornice line across the top. And that sort of gives you a bit of a sense of the path that we've taken. So thank you very much. I appreciate the time to share this with you. And I want to thank the town for being given the chance to be involved in this. Thank you.
So I'll turn it, and Tanetta, do we have Marcus speaking or just the report now?
I can turn it over to Marcus. Marcus, I know you put in correspondence. Did you want to speak to your correspondence or to the process at all quickly, and then we can hear questions, or would you like to go into questions?
I can just speak very quickly from a heritage perspective. As some of you may be aware, our firm has been involved with the town since the original application was submitted. And in part, as some of you may have seen in our early concerns, were about the impact upon the cultural landscape, upon the streetscape, and indeed on the cultural landscapes north of Dorian. And I think one of the big things that we've seen through this process is a effort to actually respond to that, a very collaborative process, and a sincere effort, I think, to ensure that the heritage issues that we identified through the peer review were addressed. And as we indicate within our letter, we're satisfied that our outstanding concerns were addressed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Letourneau. Anton, I'm just going to do two motions here. I'm going to do the motion to receive the resolve that the delegation from Gordon Stratford be received. Can I just get a mover and a seconder for that? I can't see anyone on my screen. I can see Kate. I'm sorry. Let me just.
I'll second it, Councillor Bothwell.
And I've got John. Thanks. All in favor? To receive, thank you. And then I have a motion just to resolve that the delegation from Marcus Letourneau be received. That's just a formality. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that one? Olia and John again. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. It's carried. So Antonetta, did you want to speak to the reports and then we can open it up to questions?
Through you, Councillor Bothwell, I'm fine if the committee just wants to move into their questions. I said the introductory piece at the beginning. I hope that it came through how well we all work together. And I hope that everyone's proud. This is the first for our town. I'm personally very proud of what we accomplished together and the collaborative nature and the regard that was given to our historic Main Street. So I think, you know, the report is self-explanatory. We just, from a planning perspective, it was comments from the Heritage Committee that we had to get. And so we wanted to do that. So, and we wanted Gordon to present how the changes had evolved and the evolution of where we got to, or how we got to what you see in front of you now, instead of just giving you drawings and not having any of that context and explanation for the evolution. So I think that's enough, unless you're looking for something in particular from staff to answer any questions. Other than that, I'm really happy to hear what the committee has to say about this.
Yeah, well, people might want to look at it again, so I think we might leave it up. Thank you very much, Antonetta, and thanks again, Gordon, and sorry, I should say Mr. Stratford and Mr. Letourneau. What I was going to do is I'll bring it to the, if we can, stop sharing for a moment just so I can see everyone on the screen, that would be great. I might get you to go back and thank you and bring it back up to answer questions. I would like to just, what I'll do is I'll ask members of the committee if they have any questions focused on the delegation, and then following that, if there are any that are specific to the reports that are included as correspondence. So first I'll ask members if they would like to bring forward any questions to the delegations with respect to the revised designs that have been brought forward. And you can just put your hand up, or you can use the raise hand to ask questions. Anybody? Any questions of the presenters? None? Absolutely none? Okay, I have a question. It was an awesome presentation. Thank you very much, Gordon. Really, really well done. I appreciate the clarity you brought to it and the process that you undertook with all the partners that worked with you, the region, and our planning staff and everyone to come up with these revised designs. I think it's very well done. It'll be helpful for the community to see how it's evolved over time. I just wondered, you mentioned every project becomes a precedent for the future. Can you explain that from a design perspective, what that means? And are the balconies, have they been expanded? Are they usable balconies in the front of the building facing Main Street? Those two questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, in terms of the first question about every project becomes a precedent, there are two meanings to it. One is if this development, as an example, becomes my apologies here, an exemplar, and a town should be looking for those exemplars, things that you can point to and say, you know, the brickwork was done so beautifully here, or the response to the street building was done so well, it becomes a very powerful precedent for the town to be able to look to and to say to other developers and other builders and other designers, this is an example in our own town of how it's working so well. The other thing that happens too is that developers are always looking for precedents. They're looking for, and I'll just use an example. If a certain density was allowed on a site one time, they'll say, well, this is my opening to get that same density. So every project carries with it a certain weight in terms of becoming a precedent, not only in terms of its character and its design quality, but also what it represents in terms of the change and the growth in the city. And from my experience on design review panels, it's natural for developers to look to see where those clues are, because that gives them their opening if they want more density, or if they see something that's been given a buy on another project, then they'll say, I think I could do that too. And I'll point to it and I'll say, down the street, you allowed this to happen. I want that too. So I think in this particular case, the most important part about this project is, as a building type, and you'll probably see more of these coming into town, and that is more density, and a lot of towns are experiencing this. As density comes in, it's how it's handled. These early projects, when a new building type comes in, are so important, and that's where I think the precedent becomes even more valuable, because if you can get them right at the beginning, then you stand a very good chance of getting it right through further development. So sorry, long answer to your question, to the point where I forgot the second question.
The balconies, if the ones on the front have been expanded or extended, and if they're usable balconies, because there was some concern about, I know they're set back. Are they set back far enough from the sidewalk that there's no, won't be any falling lawn chairs or anything?
No, I think that they are set back. We were concerned that they not be full protruding balconies. On the rest of the building, on the east and west elevations, you'll see their balconies that you could take a chair and a table out onto. In this particular case, because it was the second floor, we wanted to make sure it felt more like almost like a Juliet. Now, a Juliet is a balcony without a balcony. It's more like a French door that opens and you have a railing immediately in front of your window. So I think these are somewhere between that and a very, very shallow balcony. I think there had even been talk by the developer at one point where those balconies would recess in a little bit, because we did have conversations about, while there are some bay window examples or precedents along Main Street, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there are very few or no balconies, at least in the heritage sense. So that's something that we were letting the developer know about.
Thank you. That's appreciated. And then I have a question for Antonetta, further to Gordon's comment there about setting a precedent and other buildings looking to this one. We're now undertaking the Downtown Reimagined project, and I believe that there was talk when this was first brought forward that we need to strengthen our urban design guidelines. How do you see this development and what we were seeing tonight impact on the future developments with respect to urban design guidelines? And are we working on that within our Downtown Reimagined project as well, to take what we're learning here from this exercise and incorporating it into a further model that will be used for other developments, such as the one where the burned out corner is? I think we have a 3-story that's been approved to go in there in one of the buildings that was burned down. So how will this impact that?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, there's a number of positive things that can impact the Downtown Reimagined and the refresh to the urban design guidelines. First is the very fact that we're having a conversation about urban design in such a comprehensive way. And I think increasing the language and the comprehension about the importance of urban design and those small details amongst staff. And I think that's really an important start. The second piece in terms of the urban design that I think is critical is this was our first ever urban design review panel with a series of experts commenting on applicants' proposals for our town. And we hope that that now becomes the precedent for how we deal with major development applications, that consultants with the experience like Gordon, the sensitivities to heritage, like Marcus and Gordon can now become a part of the process, how we get an application to evolve from that initial concept phase to something that truly is respectful of the character of the community that it will now call home. And so I'm hoping that the urban design review panel becomes a permanent fixture in how we review major design and development applications in our community. And finally, everything that was in the current design guidelines for downtown was applied to here and enhanced. And the regional staff were excellent in bringing forward everything that was in those design guidelines, reminding us of what was there, and then further enhancing it. And they've also, for everyone who's on the call, have submitted a letter of how the process went from their perspective. And I think that close partnership with the region and their design expertise, because they actually have an urban design and landscape department, and leveraging them to help the town's review of application, again, are all critical components that we hope to add to the future of design of application review. And all of this will not only enhance the design guidelines, the current ones, when we do a refresh, but I think we'll also introduce a lot of these process improvements as well.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Antonetta. Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to comment. What really impresses me is you've taken a 4-story building and given the front of it a 2-story approach, which is what our downtown is. There isn't another 4-story building downtown. And you've pushed back the 3rd and the 4th story, which then when people are, when the building is complete and people drive up and down the street, what will jump out at them is the fact that there's a continuation now of that 2-story, and it'll blend right in, and especially when you're taking into consideration the facade, the brickwork. And I just want to compliment the planning department for all that hard work and bringing these people together, and the massive coordination that must have taken place in a short period of time. And just looking at that report that Mr. Stratford presented to us, and the notes and the details, it's really exciting to see what's come out of this, because 2 years ago when we saw that 4-story building, it just looked like a 4-story building that it wasn't quite going to fit. This seems to really fit into the downtown, and it's a starting point, like our chair has already pointed out. Mr. Stratford, this is going to set a precedence, and this is going to make other developers toe the line and make sure that heritage and our culture downtown is appreciated, and it's to carry forward. There hasn't been a new building built downtown in over 30 years, I'm sure. It might be even 40 years. So this is, what a wonderful way to start it. And I want to thank again that planning department for all your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dunstall. Anyone else would have any comments on the delegations? Okay, seeing none. Oh, yep, Kate, go ahead.
I too just wanted to, no question, through you, Madam Chair. I'm thrilled with the improvement on the design. Before I felt it was so visually noisy, and now it just feels right. And I think that our town citizens will also see that everyone has worked so closely together to make such a beautiful building for our downtown. And I just wanted to thank everybody also. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Anyone else have any comments? Olia?
Very briefly, because we're at 7 o'clock on the first agenda item, but to echo Councillor Dunstall and Member Shiro's comments, I also agree that considerable effort has been made to address the heritage concerns, and I certainly appreciate the presentation. We all know it's impossible to please all of the public, and there will be people who will still hate the fact forever that there's 4 stories and not something less or whatever, but I truly see the efforts that have been made to make a difference in the initial design and to integrate it into the fabric of what's already there. So I'd like to extend thanks to all departments in the region and staff and the consultants. And thank Mr. Stratford for a very good presentation. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any further questions, comments? I have a motion, just resolve that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee provides the following comments received on the revised design for Century Condos. And I think all I heard was a lot of thank yous and a lot of appreciation for the work put into it. Can I have a mover and a seconder on that? Mayor Jordan and Olia, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. The next item on the agenda is actually the report itself. So if members have had an opportunity to read the correspondence actually that we've moved up from item 7A, which was the urban design review for Century Condos, there was the correspondence there from Mr. DeSantis and Mr. Letourneau. Are there any comments on that correspondence? Otherwise, we'll just receive it. Seeing no further comments, I have a resolution resolved that the correspondence from DeSantis Homes, LHC, and Niagara Region regarding the urban design review for Century Condos be received. I need a mover and a seconder, please. Olia, Kate. And all in favor? Thank you, that's carried. Antonetta, sorry.
I'm just wondering, in lieu of the comments, because there wasn't anything sort of constructive by way to give back, do we want to say that the committee found the applicant, like the design review design, sorry, the renewed design and improvement and is content, or do we need to add any content? I just want to make sure we fulfill the comment requirement. So I don't know what we need to note in that resolution, but is it worth mentioning that, you know, it was to the committee's satisfaction or something of that nature? I put that out for the chair's consideration.
Sorry about that. So what I'd like to do is amend the motion that was to resolve that the revised design be received basically. And Mayor Jordan and Olia were the mover and the seconder on that. So can we say that resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee supports the revised design concept for Century Condos? Is that suitable to the mover and the seconder, Mayor Jordan and Olia? Or
I'm fine with that.
Mayor Jordan, are you fine with that?
Excuse me, Councillor.
That's good. Thank you.
Sorry,
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off the
Ann?
mayor. Excuse me, Councillor Bothwell. I didn't mean
Yes.
to cut off the mayor there. We should probably date that. Should we not say that the design dated April? I don't know if it's dated today or this week.
Okay. Resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee supports the revised design concept for Century supports the April 13th revised design concept for Century Condos. Does that make sense, Anne?
Yes, I believe so.
So that would be resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee supports the April 13th revised design concept for Century Condos. All in favor? And that amendment is carried. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for those comments. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is the verbal update for the Grimsby Beach study. And I think that's Bianca. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Bothwell. So I wanted to give a quick update on the Grimsby Beach study. So, sorry, just one second. So just some quick notes. So the Grimsby Beach visioning session has now been completed. We have now opened up some additional areas on our Let's Talk Grimsby portal to start meaningful conversations about the appropriate tool for the Grimsby Beach area. We are still collecting this data. And we also have shared to the website and the Grimsby Beach portal the presentations from our consultant from the visioning session for those who weren't able to attend. Both sessions were well attended, and we received integral information from these meetings, and we look forward to using this information during the next stages of the study. I don't know if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Is there any questions on the Grimsby Beach study update? I have a hard time seeing everybody because I've got the presentation screen up in front, so you might need to just speak up or raise your hand with the raise hand function. Okay, I don't see no comments. So I need a mover and a seconder. Resolve that the verbal update regarding the Grimsby Beach study be received. May I have a mover and a seconder for that? I've got Kate, and I need another one, sorry. John, thank you. And all in favor? Thank you, carried. Move to the next item on the agenda, the verbal update on the designation and Grimsby Remembers plaques.
Through you, Madam Chair. First of all, good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to update everybody on the designation plaques at the previous Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee meeting on March 9th. We presented an outline of what the new plaques would look like with the town crest. Everybody was happy with those, so I sent those off to Burlington Signs for further artwork, and they have sent back these two drafts of what the plaques would look like. Just to point out a few things here for you, in the yellow boxes on the bottom left and bottom right corner, the higher quality logo will be provided to Burlington Signs. So that's a vector image that I need to send over to Burlington Signs. I sent them over a placeholder for the time being so that they could produce these renderings for us for your perusal. Also, the logos that you see there, they will not be in color. They'll be matching the same color that you'll see the text and the other the background. So I just wanted to bring those forward for you to see this evening. And also just a quick update on the Grimsby Remembers plaques. They were installed March 25th, and we have provided the pictures that you see here for Lake Iroquois and the agricultural microclimate plaque as well. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thanks, Andrew. Can I just, can you go back to yeah, now that, isn't it, now somebody correct me here, but isn't it James Willison, W-I-L-L-I-S-O-N, not Wilson? Kate, right? Yeah. I think the spelling is incorrect on that plaque.
Yep. I will bring that attention to them.
And you're pretty confident the rest of them have been corrected? I think we brought forward a few other spelling corrections at the last review.
Yes, all those spelling corrections were made and sent to them, so that might have been an issue on their end that I'd have to clarify with them in translation, but I'm not.
And yeah,
I
if
will
you,
double check with them,
Mhm.
definitely.
I would suggest maybe just prior to you going out, send your final copy work to them, that maybe you circulate all of the draft plaques again one more time to the committee, just because this possibly, just don't want to see spending a lot of money on something that we might have to possibly reprint, right, or redo.
Absolutely. That's, yes.
Yeah, so maybe
Definitely.
just before the proof goes, just quickly send it out to the committee one more time for a final, just a quick eye on it to make sure there isn't anything else that stands
Absolutely.
out. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other members have questions from the committee for Andrew? Sorry. Olia, sorry, I can't see you, so please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that it would be nice to see the final copies back again as well, just as they will actually be printed, just because it's kind of hard to imagine what the town crest is going to look like in this single color when we're seeing the multicolored version now. So for that reason as well. Thanks.
Okay. Great.
Through you, the chair, I will be happy to bring back any other artwork that they send me. It's just I got this last week, so I wanted to bring it to the committee's attention as soon as possible.
It's great. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, Kate, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair. Just a question to you. I noticed there's a little bit of a change in the design of this one from the last months, where we had, it's hard to spell or hard to read it with this through my, it says, I think it says designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. We had it running along the bottom. I'm fine with it changing. I was just curious if it's because it was too small or too much money, or.
I am not sure why it was removed. I can send an email back asking why it was removed and if it can be added back in. But if
I'm not necessarily saying it just changed from last month.
Absolutely.
I'm one way or the other. I was just curious if there was a
No,
reason.
Yeah, in my rush to get it to the committee, I did not go through the final artwork with them. I just got the email from them and I wanted to bring it to your attention as soon as possible. So all this positive feedback is something that I can take back to Burlington Signs so that it can be implemented in the future with your comments, of course.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
So we're looking at, Andrew, just you're going to see if that can be put back into the proofs before we see the final proofs. Is that what I'm hearing? Absolutely.
Nothing will be produced unless the committee signs off on it.
Okay. Did I see Anne? Did I see your hand up as well? No? Antonetta?
Yes, through you, Councillor Bothwell. Just wondering if we get it back quickly enough, is the committee agreeable to review that via email so that we can get it in production sooner instead of waiting until the next minute? And if we could just get consensus on that, then, you know, we can work towards the production time, because that will take some time as well.
I believe if that's fine with me, if it's the will of the committee, I see that's the most expedient way to do it. John's good with that. Everybody want to give a little head shake or handshake or, okay. But just, yeah, I think it's just really important that by email that we all do see the final proof before it goes, and then we'll have that final input and get those answers back to you if there's any comments. Thank you. That's great, Antonetta.
Through you, Councillor Bothwell, one more thing. Just if we hear back that they can't fit the designated on the bottom, I'm hearing from Kate that that's not a deal breaker, but I wanted to know what the rest of the committee thought about that in case they tell us it's too tight or it's going to be significantly over budget. Is the committee okay with it without it saying that, only if we hear back that they absolutely cannot do it?
Can I have comments from committee on that? Anne?
For you, Madam Chair. I think that we should kind of find out why it can't be added. I'd like to see, like, I liked it having that on the bottom personally. So if we could, like, if they tell us it's going to cost more money, what's the difference in cost? Or if this is just an oversight, then let's add it back in.
Okay. So I think that's a decision we'll make when the proofs come back, Antonetta.
Okay, fair enough. Yep.
Okay. Can I get you to take your screen down for me, Andrew? And then I can just double check my, thank you. Mayor Jordan?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Anne that I like it better with the writing on the bottom. and I would like to see what the cost difference is, if there is any. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any further comments? Kate?
In retrospect, with your insight, Anne, I kind of agree with Anne, only because we're trying to create awareness in our community and beyond and noting that these are designated buildings or monuments. I think it's important that the sky didn't fall on anyone's head and it was designated, right? So I kind of agree.
Yeah, staff concur. I also don't want any confusion between listed buildings and designated buildings. So my preference would be that it says that it's designated. I'm even fine if it's designated like Ontario Heritage Act and not designated under the Ontario Heritage Act, but we'll work with the vendor and get back to you shortly.
Thanks, Antoinette. Any other further questions on that? Olia, go ahead.
It wasn't a question. It was just to echo sentiments of the other committee members. Yeah, in terms of setting it apart from other buildings that aren't designated. I'm hoping it's just an oversight, because I think every previous draft that we've received up until this point, including the quotes, had it on there. So I'm hoping it's literally just an oversight.
Thank you. Any other further comments? I have a motion. I've reworded it a bit here, that resolved that the verbal update regarding the designation and Grimsby Remembers plaques be received, and that Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee recommend that the proposed artwork from Burlington Signs be received, and that staff be directed to circulate the final proof to committee for approval. So is everybody, Olia, go ahead.
So, sorry, are we like moving and seconding? Because that's what I was trying to do.
Yep. If you want to move that, that's great.
Sure.
And can I have a seconder, please? Anne, thank you. So all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next item we've moved up is the verbal update on the designation plaque design for 53 Ontario Street. And Andrew?
Oh, sorry. There we go. Sorry about that. So this would be the updated plaque for 53 Ontario Street that we are looking for your approval on the verbiage that we have added. That was taken out of the bylaw for the property, the designation bylaw. So this is what the rendering that I came up with so that I could send this information out to Burlington Signs for future consideration.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any comments on this one? I'm thinking that it would be in context to have this one come back to the committee with the others, just to ensure the consistency with the look of them all. So I'm going to suggest, if the committee is comfortable with that, that we don't move, we just receive this, and as well it be circulated with the final proofs for the remainder of the plaques via email for committee approval. Any other comments on that? Councillor Dunstall?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question for Andrew. So the crest on this one doesn't look like it's color. Is this exactly how the crest will look on the others once we see the proofs?
So
a better idea of what we'll be dealing with?
I would need to contact Burlington Signs.
Oh, yeah, okay. That's fine. Sorry, I don't mean.
No, that's okay. To answer your question, this is just something that I could prepare in-house, and because the committee didn't have a chance to see this plaque along with the other ones in the last round, I wanted to make sure that the committee was okay with presenting Grimsby Great Western Railway Station as the title with the circa 1855 in the
Yep.
in the plaque as well. So I just wanted to make sure that I could send this to Burlington Signs. So with the committee being happy with what they're seeing here.
Thank you. Yes, I would agree.
Okay.
Antonetta, sorry.
Councillor Olia had her hand up first.
Yeah,
I'm
sorry.
happy
So
to go after.
I apologize, Olia. Go ahead.
I hope I'm not like missing a discussion we've already had on the name, but just right out of the gates, I'm not in love with it. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Was it a Grand Trunk railway station or something like that? I don't know. Just Great Western Railway Station. It just doesn't, I don't know. On first read, I don't love it. And I wish I had a better way to verbalize that, but I don't know. I don't know if it makes me think of a Western movie or something. It just doesn't seem to fit. And unless it like has been fully historically vetted and that's the best name for it, then obviously I'm going to put my cards down. But on first blush, I don't love it. And I'm just wondering if there's something else we could work with for that.
Antonetta, do you have the actual designation report or where this came from?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. If I understand correctly, it was taken directly from the bylaw designating the property. We can verify if there's another name that we can use as an alternative, but it was directly from the bylaw. If it's factual, we're going to have to keep it whether we like it or not. But if it's if we can say, you know, typically what you might want to do for plaques, if it was a Grand Trunk for longer than it was a Great Western Railway Station, you might want to note that. But if it was Great Western for longer, we're going to have to note that as well. So we can look into that.
Mayor Jordan, did you have another comment on that?
Yes, it was also called Niagara Packers at one time, and that's probably not a great name either.
So Andrew, can I get you to take that down for a minute?
Absolutely.
Thanks. Antonetta, did you have anything else further that you wanted to add to that?
Yes, please. Through you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify the reason of the plaque. Don't look at that design. The design will be the artwork that Burlington Signs sends us. It was really the verbiage that we're looking for approval on, but we'll verify if that's the most accurate or if there's another historical alternative that would be equally representative of the history of the building when we send out the email with the revised designs for everybody's review.
Great. Kate, were you waving your pencil or wanted to comment?
Through you, Madam Chair. I have a question, just a correctness. Is the Ontario Heritage Act, is that the name, the official name? I'm looking up on the internet and it's Ontario Heritage Act. The reason I'm asking is just for when we get our final proofs that just our capitalizing, not capitalizing under, but capitalizing the, and I'm pretty sure it's Ontario Heritage Act, which makes the not a capitalized or go capital with everything. Just under is not less important than the, because I believe it's Ontario Heritage Act. And I'm just wanting so it's nice and tidy and correct. I'm pretty sure it's Ontario Heritage Act.
It's a good question as well. We can leave that with Antonetta and Andrew to go back and confirm that when they finalize.
So
I'll be happy to take any of your comments into consideration and come back to you either through email like we discussed or at the next Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee for your approval.
If I may, Councillor Bothwell, I'm just going to note that once we send these out via email, though, that will be the last round of comments, because once they go to production, after there's a design artwork change, there's a lot of fees. So please give it a very thorough look when we send it back via email, just so that we don't incur any additional or unnecessary expenses for these, because we've looked at them now a few times, so we need to be certain. But a good note on the capitalization, we'll look at the formal way of doing that, and we'll take all these other comments back. But when we circulate them via email, you know, please look at them with a fine-tooth comb. It's very easy to miss these types of details when you're doing so many of them. So, and you've looked at them so many times. So we look to your fresh eyes to help us catch any possible little errors. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure the committee will certainly do that. We have done a couple of vetting now. It just seems that a couple of them come back with additional changes that weren't part of what we had discussed previously. So we'll make sure that everybody has one good, clear eye on the final proof when we do get that by email. Thank you. So the motion that I have in front of me, if there's any further questions on that, I just want to keep the door open before I put the motion forward. Is resolved that the verbal update regarding the designation plaque design 53 Ontario Street be received, and that staff provide the final proof to committee for approval. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? I have Anne and I have Kate. Thank you. And all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the designation cross-reference with the Heritage Trust. Is that Andrew or is that Antonetta?
I'm just trying to bring up my
Okay.
screen right now and I'm having some
Okay,
issues.
thank you. No
I
problem.
apologize.
Take your time.
So as was requested by through you, Madam Chair, as was requested at the last meeting by the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee meeting, there was a request to do a cross-reference with the Ontario Heritage Trust, and I have created a spreadsheet here just to go over our findings of what the key issues were with the cross-reference. As you'll see at the top, 270 Main Street East was showing on the Ontario Heritage Act register. That is correct. The Grimsby designation list had to be, or needs to be, adjusted to address the 270 Main Street East address. The reason for that change was because during the development, the property was actually moved. So the address was changed. So that will be reflected on our list going forward in the future. As you see underneath in yellow, the Bank of Commerce building, the address is 3739 Main Street West on the Ontario Heritage Trust website. And on ours, it was 35 to 37 Main Street West. So we need to adjust again our website and our list to reflect that change. As you can see underneath, Cult Block, which was 5 Main Street West, this property needs to be designated again. It was put forward as a designation in the future, or in the past, sorry, but it did not make the 120-day window to get the designation bylaw passed. So the Heritage team will have to go through and designate that property again so that it can be reflected within our list and the OHT's website. Snetzinger Block, 2 to 6 Main Street West. This is a designated property. The OHT has all the documentation. We need to update our website to reflect that it is designated. 314 Main Street East, the designation was withdrawn by council, as well as the Ontario Methodist Campground Cottage at 33 Victoria Terrace. That was also withdrawn from by council, sorry. So they remain on the OHT's website as a placeholder as to what was there and what no longer is. They will keep that as a record. They will not be changing that. So you will always see that discrepancy between the two lists unless you want that reflected on ours at the towns as well. So I leave it to the committee for any questions that they have.
Can I just, Andrew, ask you about the Cult Block, the 5 Main Street West?
Yes.
It went through Planning and Development Committee September 15th, 2015, and I think it went to council at that time, September 21, 2015, it went the same time as the Snetzinger block did. And you'd mentioned that the Snetzinger block's designation paperwork went through, but yet both of them are only showing as only the notice of intention to designate. So how did the Snetzinger block go through and the Cult block didn't at the same meeting? Do you know?
Unfortunately, I'm not sure with my experience. And it was the bylaw, so it went through council to be designated, but then you have to draft the bylaw and then
Yeah.
council. Yeah, so I'm not sure why one was designated and not the other.
Well,
I can't really speak to that. I can
yeah.
only say that we don't have the bylaw for cult block. And
It looks like Bianca has her hand up, so maybe
Sorry.
she can offer some insight. It's okay. I
Please.
can help you out, Councillor Boswell,
Thank
when
you.
you don't see hand.
Go ahead, Bianca. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Bothwell. Yeah, I could just provide a little bit of clarification. So I know that 2 to 6 Main Street West there, they did have a facade grant and they did have the heritage grant that went with it. So I don't know if that was what pushed the bylaw through. But neither myself, Andrew, or Antonetta were there at that time when the bylaw was supposed to be passed. But I can confirm for sure 2 to 6 Main Street West is, and I don't know if it has something to do with the grant, just to provide some clarification there.
No, I appreciate that. I tried to do a thorough search to find the bylaw for the Snetzinger block, and I couldn't find the bylaw anywhere in any of the council minutes or the committee of the whole. So if you could provide that to us, I think that'd be great, just to confirm which meeting that bylaw actually did get passed by council. That would be appreciated, just because the timing is so weird that the two of them went the same time and one went through and one didn't. So it would be interesting to know when that bylaw designation actually did go through council. And then what would be the next steps you need to do, Bianca, to do the cult block one? How will you handle that one?
Sure, through you, the chair. So I will look for the bylaw for that. It should be included with the grant application. So I can look back at an old application and see if the document's in there, and I'll follow up with that one. As for the other one, we'll have to reissue the notice of intention to designate. So that'll include the property owner, the Heritage Trust, and be put in the newspaper. And then it will be 30 days. And if we receive an appeal, then we will do the same process we're doing for our appealed properties right now. If it's not appealed, then we'll be able to pass the bylaw. And again, we'll have that timeline, as Andrew mentioned earlier, to pass the bylaw in.
That's great. So as soon as we can get that through, the better, I guess. So you're looking at trying to get that through council in the near future, right?
Yeah, and I just through the chair, might be important to note we may have to do some additional vetting, as myself, Antonetta, will likely have to speak if it is appealed. So we'll have to vet some of that information and just make sure our name is somewhere on there in case we have to speak to it.
Okay, thanks. So I think that covers, because I think we found the Grand Railway Station also was another one that we caught that had not been, the bylaw hadn't been put through, and you guys caught up with that one as well. So you think we've got them all now? Are you confident, Bianca, that we've caught all the ones that might have been like from 2015 that just kind of slipped through the cracks?
Through the chair, as for what was sent for notification to the trust, this is everything we have. We do have some designation reports that we have started through the last 3 years I've been here, that we are hopefully hoping to finish up, and then we'll be able to bring those forward. But as of ones that actually started the notice of intention to designate, we are caught up.
Perfect. Thanks. Sorry, Antonetta, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say, this is our best effort, but it's really hard to determine what was done, 6 or 7 years ago, or even longer, and where sort of people dropped the ball. So I like to clean these things up, but I also want to be mindful of our priorities and how much time we spend on this. So we've tried to clean it up as much as possible. I also note that for the one that we can bring the bylaw back to council or issue the notice of intention to designate, we might want to update the attributes list based on how old or dated that bylaw is, or we have to be able to defend it if we're called to the Conservation Review Board, right? So I think Bianca and Andrew and I might want to do a thorough review, make sure we agree with the attributes that are there, and also see if any changes have happened to the building. That attributes list may need to be updated. So I just want to manage expectations from the committee. It may not be the exact bylaw that went forward in 2015 based on what modifications, if any, have happened to the building. And also it has to be something that we would find defensible so that if called to question, we could defend that. And, you know, if the heritage value is there, not knowing the block right off the bat, I imagine it will be, but just letting the committee know about possible avenues that might have to happen. Yeah.
Can we put that on the on your radar then? Like, I know that the original designation report was done July 2015, and it seemed to be pretty extensive when I read it for the cult block. So can we have that come back to the Heritage Committee with your review? Just because Bill 108 and the pressures on downtown right now with respect to you know, ongoing development, and there's been some changes and modifications to some of those buildings. So what timeline would you see being able to come back to the Heritage Committee with an update on that designation report?
I'll let Bianca has her hand up, so I'll let her.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to note there is the obstacle of the archives being closed with of COVID. So that is what's actually currently delaying some of our designations. We'll do the best we can on that end, but just to vet some of that data, we may need to get into the archives.
Okay, great. So we'll just put that on the to-dos, the follow-ups, right? Thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry, any other committee members? I kind of took over on that and I shouldn't have. Anyone else wish to speak to the cross-reference here? I'm having a hard time seeing. So if you're any other, do you see any?
There are no hands, Councillor Boswell.
Thank you, Antonetta. Okay. So I've got a motion then. Resolve that the verbal update regarding the designation cross-reference with Heritage Trust be received. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? I've got Olia and I've got Anne. Thank you. And all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, and the next item on the agenda is the 15 Fair Avenue Butternut Tree verbal update.
Yes. Through you, the chair. So a letter was produced and sent to the owners of 15 Fair Avenue about the butternut tree that came up at the last Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee meeting. Just informing the new homeowners that there is the current land use study going on in Grimsby Beach, and also that the butternut tree is protected under the Endangered Species at Risk in Ontario, and the penalties that would incur if they had done anything to the tree in the future. The letter also included a PDF from the Ministry of Natural Resources outlining government response about the butternut tree and about it being an endangered species. So I just wanted to bring that to the committee's attention, letting them know that their concerns were taken forward and the letter was produced and sent to the homeowner. And I'll leave it to the committee for any questions that they may have.
Kate's hand is up.
Okay, can I just, you can take down that screen, Andrew, please. Thank you. That would be appreciated. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Kate.
Through you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to you, Andrew, express a concern, first of all, that nobody lives in that house. It is a vacant house. So any mail that is directed to them will be piling up in their mailbox. Some neighbors have been cleaning up their newspapers. I believe it's for development or potentially down the road. It's a vacant property right now. So it potentially won't get to anybody unless you have directed it to another address. So that was one point. But I've been thinking about the last meeting since a comment that Mayor Jordan brought up. And he mentioned that there's a $25,000 fine. And I expressed my concerns then. about even if it's if I'm a developer, $25,000, it doesn't really mean much to me. But I started to think about Nixon Hall and question, were there fines there? And the answer would be no. And then I started to think about decisions this town has made in the past. Like, for instance, a few years ago, there was a local builder who worked with the town to negotiate that we would be removing healthy butternut trees so that they could move forward with development. And then they agreed to plant, I believe, 30 trees in Smithville. And it concerned me because I believe that I would wager you right now that the town was not charged $25,000 to agree to something like that. And I started to think about the fact that there were healthy trees at Nixon Hall. There were healthy butternut trees at this other development. There are healthy trees here in Grimsby Beach that are butternut. And the government is looking to try to map out these healthy trees because healthy trees don't reside everywhere. They believe 90% of these trees will be gone within the next 90 years. And for some reason, Grimsby has a lot of healthy ones. So we have a huge responsibility, but we have something magical here. And it would be great for us to figure out why they're healthy and maybe try to really work to protect them. And then I started to think another thing. I thought about what our options are, what we might have not done with Nixon Hall or these other projects. And a thought came into my mind, a few thoughts came into my mind, but one of the thoughts that came into my mind was that Grimsby's property lines are very funny here in the beach. And I looked on, we did a fire bylaw and we have mapping of our property lines. And I looked today actually at those property lines, and it seems that that property has encroached about 6 feet beyond their actual property line. I spoke to a neighboring property, and she said, oh yeah, our fences are not on our property line. And then I looked at the tree and I found that the tree is directly planted on the property line. It looks like from the aerial shot from the town, which means that this is a boundary tree that is co-owned equally from the property owner of both sides, which I'm not sure if the other side would be the MTO or the town of Grimsby, but we co-own that tree. That's what I believe. And I'm wondering if that gives us more power. A, does that give us more power to protect that tree and not just send a letter to a mailbox that is not going to get read? And even if it does, if I'm a developer, I'll still cut it down. And I wonder if that gives us more legs. But then I thought to myself, but what if it doesn't? And what if we can't? And I don't know the rules or the ways around this. And if you could just entertain me just for a second, because I thought to myself, do we draft a motion right now, like to have the staff to request that the staff assess first I thought, do we draft a motion to find out if that tree is actually on town land or the MTO? Do we have some sort of criteria under the, let me just read what I wrote. I found this online. It's getting dark in my room. The Ontario Court of Appeal has declared that an obscure statutory provision found in the Ontario Forestry Act means that a boundary tree, a tree whose trunk straddles both property lines, is jointly owned by both property owners. And that's January 8th, 2014. And so I thought, we have two options, at least as I see it. We could we draft a motion that requests that staff assess the butternut tree and where it's located at 15 Fair Avenue against the criteria of this statutory provision found in the Ontario Forestry Act 2, means that the boundary tree, and then I repeat that, is it jointly owned by both properties to determine if we can protect the tree using this as a tool. And I was hoping that we could do that, or I'm just thinking that the only other option would, because I just don't feel that sending a letter is enough. I was thinking that could we request that the staff assess the butternut tree located at Fair Avenue against the criteria of the Ontario Regulation 906 for determining cultural heritage value or interest, and provide Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee with the next step toward a potential designation under Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And I went through Section 29, and I found that, so according to the fella, oh God, it's on my screen somewhere, that the consultant company for the land use of Grimsby Beach study, he said that he feels by looking over the fence that that's a champion butternut, and they don't exist. He is he's just looking over a fence. He has to do some formal studies of that tree. He has to gain access to it somehow. Neighbors, a neighbor on the other side, the tree hangs over their fence. If we can't get permission, which I'm sure we could get permission, I don't know if they just take a branch. I'm not sure how it goes, but we need to find out if this tree is a true butternut tree, the kind that is being protected right now. And so just let me entertain me for a second. So the conservation of a significant, the conservation of significant architectural, historic, and archaeological resources is a matter of the provincial interest identified in the provincial policy statement 2014. And it is reinforced in the growth plan of 2019 in the Ontario Heritage Act. I'm sorry, I can barely read my writing because it's dark in here. Also, Section 2 of the provincial policy statement directs that a significant cultural resource, including natural elements and cultural heritage landscapes, shall be conserved. And so this butternut is a notable specimen, potentially, potentially not. We have to study it. But its attributes have, one, status under the Endangered Species Act. The tree appears to be resistant to the butternut canker. 3, the tree is over 100 years old, according to that fellow. The canopy of the trunk of the tree is expansive in size. The location of the tree is in the significant cultural heritage landscape of Grimsby Beach, and it offers us a historical connection to the original site. And then its physical and visual relationship to its surroundings. Similar to this designation, similar in town, we have the Grand Avenue tree stand. This butternut stand is a legacy tree to the grand era of Grimsby Beach also. And then I said, I go back to the heritage of the Section 29. The heritage resource should be protected under Section 29 of the Heritage Act. On this property is the butternut, including its root zone. Because if they do development, they're going to dig. Maybe they don't have to. We just need to meet one of the requirements to qualify, I believe. And it is a rare, unique representative. I just pulled this out from the thing. Is a rare, unique representative of an early example of style, type, expression, material, or construction of method. I pulled that from the Act. And I do believe it is. There are approximately 13,000 butternut trees in Ontario right now. Within 90 years, it is believed there will only be 1,300 of them left. And that makes it rare. And I think that checks the box for us. I really feel that we need to proactively fight to figure out why Grimsby seems to be a healthy zone for butternut trees. Wouldn't it be awesome if Grimsby Beach and this private landowner were recognized as having the oldest native butternut tree in all of Ontario? And lastly, I just wanted to make note that other municipalities have designated individual trees under the Ontario Heritage Act. The Comfort Maple in Pelham was one of the first such trees in June of 2000. And other municipalities such as Hamilton, Oakville, Niagara Falls, Caledon, Halton Hills, and Newmarket, among others, have since then used the same provisions that I mentioned above to protect significant trees. So I'm so sorry for that long-winded message. I just wanted to make sure that I was.
Did you have a motion in there that you wanted us to consider to put forward, Kate?
I wanted to bring up that as a question, because I think we have two options, and I don't know which one is more powerful. And one is the fact that do we go the one way where I think this is a boundary tree? Is there any way, and I'm looking for the experts here to know if it is a boundary tree, it might not be a town boundary line, it might be MTO. Is it our tree too? So can we protect it because it's not necessarily fully on a public or a property that's owned by somebody and not the town?
How about let's have Antoinette answer that question first. Go ahead, Antonetta.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thanks so much for that, Kate. I'll try and go through a series of things. I was trying to take notes as you went along. We'll have to determine if it's a boundary tree. From some of my past experience, if it's a boundary tree, the municipality has not only some ownership, but also some responsibility in terms of the care and maintenance. So we'll have to be careful there. I'll also note, many properties all across the Grimsby Beach area have gone far beyond their own boundaries. So we'd need to be cognizant of what precedent that might set in terms of if we're going to say, well, this is actually in our boundary and now the town might want to sort of co-own it, or it does co-own it, and what does that mean? So I think there's a lot more research that needs to be done to that. We can reach out to some of the experts. We're familiar with the other municipalities that have designated trees. I remember colleagues reaching out from Mississauga, Caledon, when they designated their first tree for, some advice or talking it through with the Ontario Heritage Planners Network. I also wanted to go back to the letter, if I could, for a second, and I'm just going through some notes. The letter approach was something that we brought up at the last meeting, and there seemed to be general consensus that we could go through some of those approaches. But if it's vacant, do you know where they lived? We use the ownership address, but if anybody knows where they live or if they have an email, we can reach out that way, just so in the interim we can reach out to them immediately. So I wanted to put that out to you, Kate, if you know anybody who knows their email address or has been in contact with them.
A few neighbors have discussed their plans with them, but it appears that they have bought it for an investment. And it is a real estate person who is potentially looking at developing a few years down the road. All I know is that they did mention they'd be renting it out eventually, but they have to get in there to clean things up. But right now, nobody is in there, and I wouldn't know how to reach them.
Yeah. Okay. That at least we know. So yeah, I think, we looked at the tree from a whole bunch of angles on Google and just going out there, and it is a magnificent specimen. We fully agree, and designation may be warranted, but just remember it applies to real property. So we can list the tree as the attribute, but then the future homeowner will need a permit for anything they do on the property, and the house itself may not require any future heritage permits. So we'll just need to be mindful if we proceed down this route. And also, I want to not caution, but it may come forward that an HIA may say, no development there is warranted, because likely, we've heard from the, I think it was from the owners, Bianca, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that there's severe foundational issues with that property. And so I'm wondering, what is the relationship between the tree root system to the foundational issues that they're experiencing? Kate, do you know? Okay. Yeah.
I have a picture. Oh, I wish I would have remembered to grab it. It's actually quite humorous. 1968, that house went for sale because another house in the neighborhood went for sale, and they happened to be on the same page. It was a single story, tiny bungalow. And somewhere under the cloak of darkness, someone probably added a second story, like is so true in Grimsby Beach. And it's most likely been added out of popsicles. But it's a topsy-turvy house. And they have full grounds to take it down. But and the foundation it's there's not much to it. So
right. So, and that just leads me to my next point. So if the house is unstable, then the HIA, let's say that heritage bylaw says the tree is what is the value and the attribute, they can take the house down, and then to actually protect the tree, it comes up that no development should be allowed on the lot at all. That may bring the question back to the town. Does the town purchase the lot? So I'm just trying to play things out a few steps ahead and make sure that as we make a decision and when we bring, you know, some more information to you, that we're going to consider it from all those perspectives. And maybe that's a good thing to do. I will have to see what the appetite is for that. The finances is for that. There's a tree near my parents' house in Toronto that the city of Toronto eventually just bought the whole lot, tore down the house because the tree was such a magnificent specimen. If I remember, I can find the article and send it out to everyone. But those are kind of some of the things I'm thinking ahead. If we designate the foundation cannot sustain, you know, being redeveloped and it needs to be taken down in its entirety, and then they can't rebuild because of the tree root system, are the implications for the town that we may potentially have to purchase that lot. So I just wanted to put it out there as something to consider down the road, because it's likely, as you say, the root system is really under many of those houses, but particularly under that house on that lot, and it's probably causing some of the disruption to the foundation that they're experiencing. So just those are all the things that we consider, you know, while I think, you know, it may be worthwhile looking into designation. I just want the committee to be aware that there may be some other implications of this decision. So those are my initial comments to what I'm hearing right now.
Antoinette,
that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify, even if they took the house down, they have to protect that tree and the root system regardless under the Endangered Species Act. So if the root system is so extensive and they do try to dig another foundation, they would be probably restricted under the Endangered Species Act due to the significance of that tree. Is that not correct?
Yes, yeah. We'll just have to see how does that play itself out in real life. If it prevents them from building something, what happens? Does the province step in? Like, I just don't know enough about that space to give the committee all those answers. But yes, that would come into effect and into play as well.
So, sorry, Kate, did you have a motion that you did want to bring forward or not?
So the question that I asked last was, which motion do I move forward? Designation or a request that staff look at if it's a boundary tree or not? I would like to move forward with some kind of motion, even if it's a motion and I thought of a third motion where we don't even know if this is a hybrid tree or if it is a natural butternut. I just don't know which way to go first. And I do want to move forward formally with something. I don't know which it should be.
Antonetta, do you see any, does the town have any ability to do an assessment or to verify whether it's a boundary or a native tree? I know that there's people that are certified butternut assessors, the Bruce Trail Conservancy and the Forest Gene Conservancy or whatever also have butternut assessors. There's a number of them that are certified by the OMNR. Do we have any way to access that or to access the property? Do we even have that authority? Do you know?
Right. So I think through you, Madam Chair, that's what I need to look into is, do we have authority to enter onto private property? But that goes back to Kate's question. If it's a boundary tree, maybe we don't need to have that authority to look at it. My second question would be, can a proper arborist make an assessment without getting up close? And so maybe we can have the determination before we get to the boundary issue. But my recommendation, if the committee is agreeable, why not put forward all three? That the committee recommends staff explore whether this is a boundary tree, whether there's any way to accurately confirm that it's of that sort of specimen that we're talking about, and that 3, staff report back on the potential for designating this tree under the Ontario Heritage Act. I don't think it has to be a one or other scenario in this situation. I think we need to, explore parallel strategies here. That would be my recommendation, Kate. I don't think you have to choose between your motions. That would just be my suggestion. I'm going to go turn on a light in my house because it's gone dark and I have no one home as well.
Thanks.
So just pardon me.
Thanks, Antonetta. Kate, are you good with what Antonetta mentioned about the three-pronged approach?
Absolutely.
Now, I just have to go and try to, clerk, did you capture that three-pronged approach in typing?
Yes, I do have the motion. So the first one, be resolved that staff explore whether or not the tree at 15 Fair Avenue is a boundary tree. That staff report on the actual species of the tree. And the third is that staff report on whether or not this tree could be designated under the Ontario Heritage Act.
Okay, so does that capture what you wanted, Kate?
I'm trying to contain my excitement.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that captures it. I got it. Anybody else want to comment on the butternut tree, the Grand Poobah tree that could make, not only are we the Carolinian capital of Ontario, if not Canada, when we get our Carolinian designation, but we may also be the Grand Poobah butternut tree, like, capital of Canada. So Kate, I think, yeah, the Grimsby Beach Grand Poobah butternut tree. That's the new name. Sorry, Mayor Jordan.
Just commenting on that tree because I have taken a look at it, and it is significant for a butternut, and its branch structure is nice for a butternut because where they're growing on the escarpment, there's some that size, but they're growing in competition with a lot of other trees. So that one has a really nice shape, and it appears to be free of canker on the on first glance. So I don't think it would be a hybrid because Bartnut, the hybrid or tree of heaven, which it hybridizes with, is relatively new to Niagara, brought in from Europe less than 100 years ago. So it seems like it probably would be a native butternut, and it's exceptionally old for a butternut. That one's probably pushing 200. I would hazard a guess on. So just a little bit more about it.
And don't butternuts only live to like 75 to 100 years old, Mayor Jordan?
Tree life isn't an exact science. Where a sugar maple might live to 200 to 300 years. The comfort maple, I think, is at about 350 now. It's in decline, but it'll be in decline for another 100 years, most likely. So, and where an oak could be 600 or 700 years, and a yew could be 4,000. So,
wow,
and even the cedars on the escarpment, the eastern white cedars, the ones up on the escarpment growing in limestone, they might only be 8 feet tall, and they're over 1,000.
Thank you.
Years old, some of them.
Got our history lesson today on trees. Anybody else have any questions on the butternut? Otherwise, I'm gonna get the clerk to read this motion. Okay, so I'm gonna have a mover as Kate. Can I have a seconder on this motion? I'll have Anne, and I'll have the clerk read it because it's quite long. Thank you.
For the chair, I have the motion. Be it resolved that staff explore whether or not the tree located at 15 Fair Avenue is a boundary tree. That staff report back on the actual species of the tree. And that staff report on whether the tree can be designated under the Ontario Heritage Act.
So I'll ask all in favor.
Just a quick question before we vote.
Yep.
Sorry, just because we're only advisory committee, shouldn't the motion say like recommends somewhere in there and then council approves it?
So I think what's going to end up happening is anything that we recommend anyway through this motion is going to go as a consent agenda item to committee of the whole. So we're asking staff to do these 3 steps and it end up going in the council endorsement package for the committee of the whole regardless.
So it's okay the way it is?
It should be.
Oh, okay, that's fine. It was just the clarification question. Otherwise, I have no issue with it.
Yeah, I think anything that we ask staff to do or provide direction ends up going to committee of the whole as a council endorsement package for their final approval regardless. So.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Do you want me to read it again, or just to be clear on that, Olia?
I'm okay, thank you, without rereading.
Okay, the clerk is going to reword it and read it one more time just to, again, make sure that the word recommend is in there, and then we'll vote on it.
Chair, the motion is that the Heritage Grimsby recommends to council, the full that staff explore whether to tree up to team. Can you hear me okay? Can everyone hear me okay now? Can you hear me okay? Okay, for the chair, the motion on the floor is that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee recommend council that the tree located at 15 Fair Avenue, whether or not it's a boundary tree, that staff report on the species of the tree, and that staff report on whether the tree can be designated under the Ontario Heritage Act.
So all in favor? Sorry, I didn't see all the hands. All in favor of that motion? Thank you, that's carried. Sorry, so thank you, everyone. The next item on the agenda is the verbal update on the brochures.
Through you, Madam Chair, I just wanted to bring forward to the committee that the brochures for the Municipal Heritage Register have been printed, and they will accompany the letters of inclusion to the Municipal Heritage Register. That will be going out very shortly. And I'll leave that open to the committee for questions.
Great, can you take down your screen, please, Andrew? Thank you. Do we have any questions on so that's the Heritage Register brochures that committee has already seen. We've vetted those through the committee. Andrew, just wondering, or Antonetta, can we continue to work on other brochures? And I don't know if this will come up in our work plan maybe later. Is that something we can talk about in our work plan?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we should talk about the other brochures. We still have designation brochures. We should likely do a Heritage Conservation District brochure. We have another one in the work, like helpful hints for heritage property owners, because they often just make mistakes, not because they want to, just because they don't know where to start or where to go. So we've got quite a few, staff have quite a few planned.
Thank you. So I've got just a motion here, resolved that the verbal update regarding the register brochure be received. Can I? Sorry, mover and a seconder for that motion. Olia and John, thank you. Councillor Dunstall. All in favor? And that's carried, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the verbal update with Nixon Hall. And I think you don't need your screen up, Andrew, if you're just going to speak to it. So.
Thank you, through the chair. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick update on Nixon Hall. So during the winter, the railing at the front of the house was getting quite wobbly, and with the recent windy days, the homeowners decided to take it down. They know they need heritage permits for that, so they haven't done anything to it. They've just taken it inside. I've since gone out and taken a look at the porch, made sure that everything was properly secured that was remaining, and we are in the process of starting some preliminary conversations about that heritage permit. And additionally, in the meantime, they are going to be having some skilled heritage professionals be on site. I just heard from the property owner this morning just to do some maintenance work on the bridge board along the roof line. And they're just going to be doing some painting, and they are using a oil-based paint, which is above Parks Canada standards, so there'll be no latex paint involved. And it's a great product that's very breathable. So we look forward to seeing those integral elements come back to life.
Thanks, Bianca. Any questions about Nixon Hall from any of the committee members in that update? No, seeing none. So sorry, Bianca, did you say when the homeowner would be looking at moving forward with doing something with that porch?
Through the chair, yes. So we've started the preliminary conversations. I have been on site. We've just been trying to have the COVID safe site visit. So I have been on site. I did let her know what needs permits. So I know a couple of different areas she wants done. So I let her know that we'll be needing detailed specifications of what they're hoping to do, and then drawings to go with them. And then we'll also want to take pictures of the railing before work gets done, and just making sure that we have a proper documentation of everything. And that information's been shared with them. And I know she was hoping to get something started like early spring, but I know she has a lot of plans for the summer. So we're going to get going on some of those permits. So those should be coming in the coming meetings.
Perfect. Thank you for following up on that and staying close to what's going on in that building, because it's very dear to the community. And I know that they're working really hard to restore the inside, you said as well. So it's really good to see the owners making that concerted effort to work with planning staff to do something that's really, it's going to be for the long haul, very, very well put together for the future. Thank you. Thanks, Bianca. Any other questions on that? Or I have a motion here, just resolved that the verbal update regarding Nixon Hall be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder on that, please? Olia and Anne, thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And then we'll move to the next item, which is the revised mass inclusion list.
Thank you. Through the chair, Andrew, it's okay. You don't have to put the PowerPoint up for this one either. So I just wanted to give you a quick update. Since the last meeting, we have revised the mass inclusion list to exclude 4 properties. These properties were removed based on misrepresentation and use of heritage materials that was likely done to encourage compatibility with the existing heritage buildings and existing streetscape. However, it is not recommended as best practice within the heritage field, as it is often interpreted as an old building from the public realm. Although compatibility is an integral element to consider in the heritage field, as outlined in notable documents as included in the report, such as Standards and Guidelines for Historic Places in Canada, and the Venice Charter was introduced by the International Council of Monuments and Sites. They speak to key elements that are often overlooked, such as ensuring additions are distinguishable and that historic material and original craftsmanship is not being falsified or misinterpreted. It is important to note that all new construction on the heritage building should be subordinate to the original elements. It is also not recommended that heritage elements be incorporated into new buildings, as it again falsifies the interpretation of the building being a heritage structure. Although originally these elements may have had value, often when they are removed from the original site, their contextual value and associative value can be stripped and often is not documented. Something as detailed as replacing a piece of glass inside an old stained glass window, and compared to something as complex as a new development, is important to note that all materials must be compatible, must be subordinate, and must be distinguishable, or the heritage significance can be misinterpreted and is in contrast of the best practices within the heritage conservation field. So I just wanted to note, moving forward, it is important to keep these in mind when giving recommendations to council for all future developments. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bianca. So committee members had an opportunity to see those 4 properties in the agenda that have been removed. Can you just please repeat the addresses, Bianca, that are being removed?
I can pull them up. Sorry, just one second. We have 515 Ridge Road West, and that was the modern building that used historic elements, which was interpreted as a heritage building from the public realm. 28 Ontario Street, that was we actually confirmed with demolition permits. There was a fire on the house, and then this front part was put on, and it was similar to the A-frame structure that's popular throughout Ontario. And so from the public realm, it does appear to be a heritage home, but once we confirmed with the with the demolition permit, we had confirmed it was a new build, and also the concrete was something that brought it to our attention. 89 Main Street West, the portion of the building is original. However, the addition in the front is a new build, and it encourages us to think it's a heritage building because they've put in elements of stained glass and similar smaller details. However, it is a modern addition. 62 Main Street West, which is the Kids Dome. They have also put on a barn in the back that was supposed to look similar to other barns along that streetscape. However, it's been confirmed with a building permit as well that that is actually a new building. And the actual heritage building has gone under significant renovations, and a lot of the original, well, most, I think all of the material is now angel stone. So I've put an updated photo there that I took this week just to show you.
Thank you. And those have it's already gone through council, right? And the amended bylaw went through with those removed, right? So they're not added to the register, correct?
Correct. So through the chair, the heritage comments were received, and then the report was approved by council with the amended appendix.
Thank you. So is there any, I see a comment from Olia, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just two quick questions, just to clarify around that process, because when we saw this list, I believe it was for last month's meeting, the comments that I had submitted were that we were maybe moving a bit quickly, and now I see that, you know, we're taking 4 off. So just to make sure I understand correctly, in the time between when this came to committee last month to today, it went to council in the revised format with the 4 removed that we're seeing today. Is that my understanding?
Through you, the chair, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, so then I know that it's the intention of planning staff to continue at this pace with like all of these significant block additions to the register. And again, I worry that it doesn't look good that if we're moving with kind of this haste and then doubling back to remove things, I don't know that that looks good. I just worry that, you know, I know it's supposed to be a working document, the registry, but my interpretation of the registry being a working document would be that properties would be added there and then hopefully advanced to the designation stage, not added and then removed because we did some further digging and decided that it wasn't appropriate to be there in the first place. I think we should be, as a committee, diligent out of the gates before we even put it on there. And I appreciate the effort to, you know, protect what we have, but at the same time, I don't want to be doing it hastily, just to then have to double back. So I guess my question I'm curious about is how were these 4 identified to not be significant in the first place? And perhaps we can look to, and I'm hoping it's not just from the property owner coming and complaining, but if there's a process that was followed, that it was found that these are not significant properties by those metrics, that we could implement that with future block inclusions. And my second question, I believe, is to Antonetta, because I think in a past meeting was mentioned, I think it was before the Christmas break, that you, in your experience, you've seen properties get designated that aren't old. And the one on Ridge Road West, 515, like in particular, that one kind of stands out to me as one that might be significant, even though if it's not old material. So I thought you mentioned that in a previous meeting. So I'm just curious about like the change in today's meeting on what's considered to be significant or not.
Through you, the chair, I can answer those first questions there. So this is actually a part of a demolition control strategy that was presented to council for as an interim measure for the Heritage Conservation District. The original idea was to come forward with a demolition control bylaw, and unfortunately, we do not have the staffing resources for that. So this was kind of the next step forward, which was these large inclusions to our register. It is a living document. It can be changed at any time. So adding these properties to the register gives us the opportunity to review all of these properties in the case that a demolition permit is submitted. So a lot of our focus in the beginning was Main Street West, Main Street East, which would be helpful interim measure while we did the Heritage Conservation District. Also, many of these are within culture heritage landscapes. So all of them are contributing attributes. So, and especially for Robinson Street, right now we have a unique collection of pressed concrete foundations and pressed concrete buildings, which is pretty incredible to have that many remaining in that area. So we're lucky to have concentrated clusters all over the town. And then we feel that it's integral to get these on the list while we have so many concentrated in those areas, which will be all contributing to heritage conservation districts down the road. As for the removal of these buildings and why they weren't recognized in the beginning, it speaks exactly to my point. We shouldn't be falsifying heritage. And unfortunately, from the public realm, these do read as heritage buildings. And that building at 515, they're using older materials to make it look that way. That is a quite recent build. I'd have to pull up the date on it. It's something we could look at as a modern, but it really has to meet one of the criteria. And at this point, from a preliminary standpoint, it doesn't, but we may need to look into contextual or associative significance. Sometimes the modern ones could be like a unique architectural style or something like that. This is mimicking a style that was prominent through Ontario landscapes. So that's why that one was removed. I hope I got all of your questions. I'm just trying to remember them all. I don't know if there's any I've missed.
If it's okay, Bianca, I'll just, oh, sorry, Olia.
I think that's enough to help. I was curious as to how it was later discovered that they were removed, and just to see if there's any process learnings that could be applied in future block registry editions. But I mean, that's, I'm sure you guys are thinking about that anyways. So I'm happy. Thank you.
Okay, Antonetta, did you want to still add to that?
I'll just add one comment. Not everything that's added to the register gets designated. So it may get designated, but the most important thing is that we can get those 60 days to determine whether it warrants designation. In past, communities have a very large inventory, so the register and then the designation list is much shorter because it takes a lot more time to do that more thorough research. But just to manage expectations, not everything that's on the listing or the register that we've added may qualify for designation, but at least we get that opportunity to weigh in and to have the proper research done. And in the interim, they're protected from demolition. So we can lose buildings that are on the register. I just want to make that clear, but we have ability to protect them, and we get 60 days to prevent their demolition to do our due diligence.
Thank you, Antonetta.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the revised mass inclusion memo? Okay, so I have a motion resolved that the memo regarding the revised mass inclusion list be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder? I have Olia and Kate. Thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is the priorities for this term. So I'll let Antonetta, this is the work plan. I'll let Antonetta speak to that.
Thank you through the chair. I'm just going to start off, and then Antonetta will add some more a little later. So we've just put the work plan up here just for reference, and just some on the side here. We just have some kind of updates on each of the items. So as we continue to hear from the committee and our community, From a heritage standpoint, some notable items that continue to be discussed at past meetings include increase of designations, overall review of heritage stone buildings, stone fences and outbuildings, the protection of heritage trees, a robust heritage register, long-term retention of significant streetscapes, and most recently, the incorporation of heritage conservation districts within our heritage program. We've also heard from the community. They would like more information on what heritage means and how these protections will affect them and their properties. More information on grant programs, reputable heritage professionals, consultations with heritage staff for hands-on and real-world conservation advice, consultation with staff regarding real estate agents, and consultation with future buyers and their sellers, more information on insurance, more information on maintenance of heritage elements, and more information on who the Heritage Committee is and how the Heritage Committee makes their recommendations. With so many integral and invaluable heritage resources within our town, which are recognized by both the community, council, the committee, and staff, we agree that all these items are important and that together we can achieve these objectives and more to ensure the long-term protection of these resources. However, as noted on the presentation, we have many items not included on this work plan, and we would like to revisit the work plan and add some of the items listed above so we can work together to prioritize these items. And we understand that this is a lot of work for such a small yet mighty team. And thus we are recommending that we have a discussion on the potential of increasing the membership and creating some potential working groups to tackle some of these items such as education and outreach, research and designation report writing, and surveying of heritage resources. It's also integral to update our work plan to incorporate the council priority of our heritage master plan for the community. We are currently at the beginning stages of this plan as we work to identify the resources that this plan will be protecting. We look forward to having this discussion today, and we are planning to continue this discussion at our next meeting where we hope to update our work plan and start to prioritize these items. We wanted to start the conversation tonight, but we understand this is a lot to consider, and thus we are also going to be coordinating a polling tool for our next meeting to help us sort out our priorities, and we can use that data to rank what is most important and what can be done later once these tasks have been completed. Thank you. Pass it off to Antonetta.
Thank you, Bianca. I really don't have much to add, except we've been talking about a variety of things and we felt they weren't really captured in the work plan. And I think we just, the more clear we can be, the more successful we'll be in achieving the goals that have the most heritage impact. So like Bianca said, we're not looking for any decisions tonight or recommendations tonight rather, but just that you take it back and think about it. Under sort of completion, staff have tried to take the lead on many of these things, but it really works best when it's a collaborative effort. And we think, you know, with some of the things that we've been hearing both from you and the community, that it might be prudent to update the work plan and talk about what the priorities are going to be for the balance of this term of the Heritage Advisory Committee. So I think we look forward to that conversation. If you could give it some thought, what really matters to you as committee members, so that we can direct, you know, our collective resources in a way that is going to have the most impact. I think that would be very fruitful. And I hope that slowly through these meetings, you're getting a better understanding of all the things that sort of planning staff have to tackle and how labor intensive it can be. And so we need to be prudent with where we manage our resources. And that's why we've done some very high impact things to sort of lead by example where we're going to have the most results. And so I think I don't know if I want to add anything more to that. I really want the committee to just take it back and have a fruitful discussion next time about their priorities and how we can establish working groups to advance some of these items. That's certainly something I'm used to from other heritage committees. And then, you know, the openness to potentially growing this committee given the heritage interest in the community.
Thank you, Antonetta. Can I know it's very small font. Can I have you take the screen down though, please, Bianca? So I appreciate the report that staff have provided, and I think what I'm hearing is that we receive it just tonight, and then we come back and we spend more time on it to go through each of the areas and look at where we might need refinement. We are 2 years into our work term. A lot has been accomplished. I have to say a big thank you to the planning staff. They've done a phenomenal job on doing catch up. When we came into this term, we looked back and found things that we had to, there's a little cleaning up with the designation reports that had to be done, the railway station, the plaques, just a lot of work that they've accomplished in the 2 years so far to date, which is amazing. But it's a good time too to come back and look at that and see whether we're still on track. And yes, there are new things we need to add and maybe a few things to take out. And we have already gone 2.5 hours tonight on this meeting. And I don't want everyone to have to be here till, how our council meetings go till like 1 a.m. So we could make this the longest heritage meeting ever by discussing this tonight. But I think it really needs its own attention at a meeting where we can actually focus on it. So I'll open it up to just some general questions maybe on the work plan, but if people are good with it, I'm going to suggest maybe we take it back. We do that, put our key points in our mind as to and comments that we want to bring forward, and then on an agenda when it's not quite as full as tonight, that we actually can devote the time to do that, put our energy into that. So at the next meeting, hopefully. Can I have some feedback from committee members on that, how they feel? Anne, go ahead.
Through you, Councillor Bothwell. I thought it was excellent. I loved the report, but there's so much on there. And I'm just worried that our meetings are always, we always say next meeting is going to be better. We're going to have a 2-hour meeting or an hour. And then we've had those for sure, especially during the pandemic. But I honestly think we should stick a date on this stuff and say this is when we're going to talk about it, because a million things can happen in the next 2 weeks that we have to add those into the meeting. And the next thing you know, it's 9 o'clock and we're like, oh, that work plan is not going to be a priority. And I'm not looking for more work for anybody because I know everybody's got a lot of work, but
no, we can just call a special meeting. How's that?
Yeah,
just to do that.
Even if it doesn't even have to be next month, but maybe we plan that if we haven't got it on the agenda by June, that we make a special meeting, something a little more concrete. I would like to get some of these things done. This is my second term on this committee, and some of those things the education to the community, Councillor Dunstall can talk to some of this too. We've been talking about this stuff for a long time and it's nobody's fault. It's just, there's a million other things to do. I would just love that if we could put a time and a place in to start hammering some of this out. It'd be great.
Sounds good. So we'll definitely look at the agenda and whether or not we can give it the time that it needs or call a special meeting. Sorry, Olia, go ahead.
I'm just going to echo Anne's comments as well. The only thing I would say is that if we're going to put a time on it, that it be sooner than later, only because there's a couple years left of this term, and the later we defer changing our goals, the less time we have to achieve them. But yeah, even if that's a special meeting and that's a short meeting with only this item on the agenda, I'm happy to do that. Also happy to not further discuss this item tonight.
Thank you. Any other comments on that? So what I'm going to suggest to staff is if they could look at our next meeting is actually on May the 11th, whether or not our agenda is going to accommodate. If not, whether we can squeeze something in before the summer between now and I guess kids are going to be home anyway forever and ever for the parents, but just to see if we maybe squeeze a special meeting in if we can't do it on the May 11th meeting. So I'll leave that with staff to look at timing. For now, we have a motion just to receive. It's resolved that the priorities for the term memo would just be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? I've got Anne and Olia again. Thank you. And all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, and the next one is the terms of reference.
Yes, so through you, Madam Chair. It was resolved at the last meeting that the committee would take the documents provided by staff for their review and come back to this meeting to have a conversation on the updated terms of reference. Staff will be taking feedback provided from the committee in order to draft an updated terms of reference for the committee's endorsement at the next meeting.
Thank you, Andrew. So this one, we did put it off till tonight's meeting. So I'm going to ask that we do, I hope that committee had time to go through. Sorry, Anton, I'll let you speak first.
Sorry, through you, Councillor Bothwell, I just wanted to recommend if we wanted to combine this with the priorities discussion so that that makes more sense for us, we could certainly do that. So just putting that option out there to the committee as well.
Thank you. How does the committee feel about that? Would they like to combine this with a special meeting to do both the work plan and the terms of reference review? Can I have some comment? Olia?
I only had a few comments on this one, so if we have time to do it tonight, I'm fine with that.
Is everyone else okay with proceeding tonight? Okay, we're going to proceed with the terms of reference tonight. Go ahead, Olia, if you want to speak to your comments first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just really quickly, a couple things I noticed in comparing the previously council approved terms of reference to this revised draft. It looks like any mention of budget has been removed, and that's a best practice in the toolkit. And it's also mentioned as one of the highlighted functions in the Ministry of Sport and Tourism attachment that was included in this agenda for a different agenda item. I think it was under the priorities item. So that's one point that I would like to see brought back to the terms of reference. You know, the committee obviously has no authority to, you know, spend town's money or anything like that. But because I really see it as a three-legged stool where we have a work plan where we have goals that we want to achieve, and some of those goals require money. So therefore input into the budget would be the second leg of that stool. And the third leg of that stool would be the annual report to council on how we've actually fulfilled those goals. So that's one item that I think needs to be brought back to the previous, to this draft, which was previously approved by council. Another thing I noted was that the in this draft that we're seeing tonight, the length of the appointment for the chair and the vice chair, it looks like this draft says that that's the whole length of the term. Meanwhile, the previous council approved terms of reference was for on a one-year basis. And the reasoning behind that would be that it's a, you know, it's a significant burden to put on a single member of the committee to be a chair or a vice for all of 4 years. Also, the toolkit talks about advancing people's, the responsibility on members of the committee as they gain experience as a best practice in the toolkit. So, you know, a junior member might have less responsibilities, and then over the course of the term, as they gain more skills, then they would, you know, let's say advance into possibly a vice chair role. So that wouldn't be possible with a 4-year appointment. And then I think the work plan was also missing from the terms of reference, which goes back to my three-legged stool. So I think that needs to be brought back into the text. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Olia. Does any other committee members have any comments? Anne?
I also noted the lack of definition on the length of term for the vice chair and chair that like Olia had. I'm also, there was some ambiguity there for number of terms somebody could serve. And I know I've mentioned this before. We have, you know, we've had partial terms, as Councillor Dunstall and I were on a partial, I'm not sure if you were or not. But, you know, it says in the description that, you know, it'll be up to council, and if there's low interest, then they can extend terms, but they can kind of determine that. And I feel like that's ambiguous. I figure it should be either, you know, 2 terms only, or it should be, there should be no term limits on the member for the Heritage Advisory Committee. I just think it should be kind of consistent. I don't want to say I don't want to leave that up to council, but I think that it just could, I just don't think it's a good idea. Just my 2 cents. And those were the 2 things that I had noted.
Okay, so was it, what I'm hearing is that that language on the term should be too full?
I think it should be more definitive. I think that it says for discussion, so we can discuss how, if we want to continue, like, and I'm okay with saying that 2 terms is enough, and that's all it is. And it's also, you know, in the event of having the same counselors representing council on this committee, that maybe, you know, 2 terms is enough, and or same thing with lay people. And I know that you find the idea of doing this was to avoid having people be on this committee for decades. And maybe a break for some people after 2 terms is enough. And I think, I don't think there's ever going to be a risk that there's no interest in it. I guess it's fair.
I just, okay, sorry. Was there anything else, Anne, that you noted in the terms of reference? Okay. I think, sorry, I'll let anybody else speak, and then I'll just mention on that one about there's some of the other advisory committees have, I think, similar language in them to this. But we can certainly make our own language. We don't have to stick with what other committees use, other than they're trying to do some consistency between advisory committees. So that's just something to think about too. And I did notice that the length of the term of the chair and vice chair for the active Grimsby and Grimsby Green, they're both 1 year as well. Annually, they'll be annually reviewed at the 1 year, similar to the language that we had in previously. And I think what I saw with this one was between versions, the red line version had it correct, and then it kind of went out and it went back. So I don't know if staff's intent was to leave it as annually, which is consistent with the other advisory committees as well. But I feel that that's also the arguments that Olia gave were supportive of that. Mayor Jordan, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. The region's the same as well. They re-elect a new chair and vice chair every year. So that's consistent with the region.
Thank you. Are there any other areas or sorry, Mayor, did you have more to speak to? Sorry about that.
No, that was just my only comment.
Thank you. Any other members of the committee have other sections or any other items that they wanted to identify in the terms of reference that came to mind? Antoinette, I'm thinking what I'm hearing is, and I agree with Olia as well, I'd like to see the language on budget, which was pretty simple in our previous terms of reference. The one line, it just basically said that Heritage Grimsby will develop an annual budget for submission to council, along with clearly defined goals and objectives for the upcoming year. And then the annual work plan will also be submitted to council. So I think what I'm hearing is that committee members would like to see that put back in. And again, there is some supporting articles by the minister, as well as in the Heritage Toolkit. And I think as Olia referred to it as the 3-legged stool, they all tie in together, and we need to know what we're working with in order to deliver on the work plan that we have in front of us. And I think that now that council has established a specific heritage budget, we have a reserve fund, it is identified as a heritage budget, that Heritage does have that role under the Act to work on providing that advice or guidance, not asking for money, but suggesting how we would use that budget through our annual work plan, etc. So I think what I'm hearing is they'd like to see that put back in, and just that little paragraph about work plan. In addition, a work plan supporting the committee's mandate as stipulated the terms of reference will be developed at the commencement of the term. So I think that just ties into the other language that you have in the amended version that says we'll report on the work plan. So we can't report on a work plan unless we actually have the work plan in the terms of reference, which we are actually going to be doing at our next meeting. So this whole exercise just again reaffirms that that language on work plan should be in there. And so we talked about length of chair, we talked about budget, we talked about work plan, those 3 changes. And then I think that was it. Antonetta, did you want to comment on that?
If I could, thank you. I think, we're not opposed to any of what the committee's saying. We tried to base this off of what other committees had mostly. So Election of the chair, 1 year, absolutely fine. Term limits, 2 terms, yep, no problem. I don't see any problems with that. I think my only confusion is the work plan. So in the past, if the work plan comes up with, if the Heritage Committee comes up with the work plan and it doesn't really include a lot of consultation with staff, and for example, this work plan didn't have any room for designation, but when we did our budget, we had to include substantial amount of money for all the ads under requirements of the act, the notices that we need to put out. And when you do that in 2 papers, it actually amounts to a lot of money. So for me, just being, new here, I saw a disconnect between the work plan and the actual budget that was needed. So I don't know how we make those more synergetic in the future. If in the past, there just wasn't maybe ample communication between the Heritage Committee and staff, but the budget certainly, if it reflected the work plan, we might have had a bit of a shortage of money for things like notices and things like that. So not opposed to including an element for budget, just wondering, they need to be synergetic, I think, between, is it the committee's work plan and then there's staff work plan and then there's council strategic priorities, and making sure they're all connected and weave into each other. So I think we can maybe use our priorities discussion to discuss that, but ideally they need to be aligned so that we have enough money to achieve the goals that we set out for ourselves.
Olia, go ahead.
Thank you, Antonetta, for that. I think that just proves the point why the budget and work plan are kind of pillars of this stool. In the past, when committee has tried to get budget detail information, it's been difficult to come by. So if there's a way that we can, like in the past, we didn't know what like the press budget was or what the media requirements were for these. Like we like that information was not easily made available to the committee. So if that's something that we can do collaboratively going forward as staff makes us aware of, hey, by the way, every time you designate, this needs to happen and that costs this, and then that'll tie right into the work plan discussions. And I think that's great to collaboratively build that together. I think that's fantastic. So thank you.
Thanks, Olia. And Antonetta, I agree. I think that exercise that we're going to be doing with the work plan or priorities will help us to feed into, as you said, the budget discussions going forward. And hopefully we won't have as much of a struggle to get the budget information as we have in the past. And that will all help us to deliver on what we need to do. And we understand our roles as well. So I think that will be a good exercise.
I'll just also note, and this is more from an information perspective, typically the ministry assigns heritage committees to be responsible for budget when planning staff is not available. So that's historically how they do that. But I will say, if there's opportunities to collaborate, we always want to explore those. But in instances where, like for me, in my experience, it has been uncommon for the Heritage Committee to have, all the budget details, just because typically if you have a full-time staff person, they'll create sort of the internal work plan, run it by the committee, but then the budget just accompanies what the work plan is. So there's less need to have those details shared, but we can explore all those things together, and happy to have all of those conversations to see what's going to work for Grimsby.
Thanks. I think it worked really well this year where we actually got to see the full budget, because I think the previous year, some of the priorities that went forward, which was the Irish Grove Woodlot, wasn't, and there was money put aside for it and we had no input into that. So yeah, I think we'll have, it will be good that we continue to see what's in the budget, and we continue to work with you guys and the planning staff to refine how the work plan and the budget all tie in together. And I think this is a good step forward. I think if we continue this momentum, it'll be good. It's transparency and accountability. And the more we can be to the public about what our budget is, where we're spending it, and what we're actually doing with the money, all those things are what, council has put as strategic priorities as well. So I think that transparency is really important at the committee level as well as council. So I appreciate that. And I think the next steps, working with planning staff, will be great on working on that priorities and work plan. And that will help us as we move forward in the next 2 years of this term. So thanks for that. I just wanted to one other question I have, Antonetta, for you in the new draft terms of reference is under section 7, authority. and maybe you can help clarify this for me. 7C, the committee does not have the authority to direct staff or work obligations or projects. And I just want to understand how the Heritage Committee is to request help with designation reports or put forward designations if the committee doesn't have any authority to direct staff or work projects. I just found that I struggled with that sentence. I don't know if you mean an individual committee member can't. As a committee, that's our job, is to provide planning staff and council with advice and recommendations.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I think the correction there is that any heritage committee under the Ontario Heritage Act is an advisory committee to council. So you would recommend to council that you'd like to see that property designated. If council agrees and passes the recommendations, that's where staff takes their authority from. So the Heritage Committee cannot directly direct staff to do something. It has to be via minutes that go through the council.
Yeah, we used to have that in our previous version, and it doesn't say that here, that it's only through resolutions to council, and that was removed. So I think maybe if we can just add something in there that clarifies that the route that we take is through resolution to council or through whatever council endorsement package is to committee of the whole with our resolutions.
I'll just say it's explicit in the act. Happy to repeat it, but it's the only way it works. All heritage committees have an advisory function to council.
I totally hear you. And we've said that in the beginning of the terms of reference and in a number of places. It's just that under authority, it doesn't say advisory at all. It just says that we don't have the authority to direct staff or work obligations or projects. And I thought it also says, though, except through resolution to committee of the whole. So I don't know if that's something we need to add, or if you're clear on it, that's fine. I just wonder if there was another way to word it that still provides for how we make our recommendations move forward.
Yeah, I have no opposition to adding it. Like I say, it's just, it's fairly well known in the act. So I'll leave it up to the committee. We could take it back and talk about that. No problem.
So yeah, I'm going to suggest that if there's a way to somehow put in that, as in the previous version of our terms of reference, that it's through resolution to committee of the whole, just some way there that clarifies it. I think that's really important. So I think the motion tonight, I mean, we've got the key recommendations that have been brought forward from committee members on suggestions for changes and amendments to the terms of reference. Can I ask that staff take those changes and perhaps come back with a final version, and that can be part of the approval process, or part of the final discussion with the work plan and priorities at the next meeting? Because I think what I'm hearing is we've given you some feedback of what we would like to see updated in the terms of reference. Does it make sense to the committee members? Does any committee member have any other suggestions on how to now route this? My thought is that we ask staff to take that back and then bring back another amended version for final approval.
I'll just add that in our process, we'll circle back with the clerk's department to make sure that everything is also, from their perspective, correct.
So it says, and that staff come back with a revised terms of reference to endorse for council. Okay, so the motion that we have tonight is resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee have reviewed and submitted their notes on the terms of reference, and that town staff will come back with a revised terms of reference for the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee to endorse for council approval. So if that meets with the committee members, I would just ask for a mover and seconder on that. I've got Olia and I've got Anne. Thank you. So if everyone is good with that, I'll ask for the vote. Can you put your hands up if you agree with that? All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Thank you, everyone, for your work on that. And the next item is the memo status sheet.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just going to quickly go over it because we we had a lot of the updates already during the meeting. So I just have the designation reports that we are preparing the appeal packages. I have the designation bylaw for 130 being prepared. I have the amending bylaw for 224 being prepared. We discussed the artwork today, and we'll make those we'll contact with Burlington Sign about those changes. We just have that the plaques have now been installed for Grimsby Remembers. We have here that the Heritage Register has had the large inclusion, but we do continue to ask the committee to bring properties forward for inclusion. I know actually on that, I will note that we did receive Kate's booklets, so we're going to take a look at those and see which properties are included, which ones aren't, and we'll have a look through those. And also to that, I know Councillor Bothwell had sent over an email as well for that property on Main Street. So we're looking into that one as well for potential. I think in that case, we may need to look more for associative and contextual value, just because so much of the facade has been modified. Just going down the list, I have the update on the brochure that we had the register printed. Oh, and for 133, we've actually been on site and did a site review of the pits and just to check and see how everything's going. And we were able to take a look on the inside of the house, which was a unique opportunity just to see how things are. And it is in great condition on the inside, which is really encouraging. The mothballing is working. I have the cross-reference for the trust, and then just the additional artwork here for the plaques. So that's everything from the status sheet.
Thanks, Bianca. Comments on the status report? Kate?
I was just wondering if I could put forward an information request or just something I noticed not there, and not that it should be there. During the last public meeting, or the public meeting we had for the Grimsby Beach land use study, I've mentioned to Antonetta about the Bell Park and the fountain at Bell Park, and that I felt that there was deterioration there, and you had mentioned that because it is a designated property, that the town of Grimsby is responsible for maintaining and upkeep of everything within it. I was just wondering if I could put an information request forward to see if staff can look at the fountain and assess that if there is, it's cracking. And the thing is I love how residents have kind of taken it over and put flowers in it and filled it with dirt, and it's lovely. And not that I'd ever want that to change, but I think it's taking its toll on this 1928 fountain. The great thing about this fountain is that it's a monument to a woman at a time when women didn't get to use their first names. And it's right there in Grimsby Beach. And the woman, she was significant. She's like, I researched her for this, and she just, her name was Margaret Gage Burkholder, and she was a huge part of this group of women that did some great stuff back then. The organization's still around. They make $3 million a year for charity that helps children and people in need, and it's still something that is going on today. And I think that it's a valuable statue that we should probably, I hate to say take flowers out of because I don't want to, but maybe just make sure it stays intact. So.
Through you, Chair Bothwell, happy to do that. Happy to have a conservator take a look. I'm just wondering if you want to make that a resolution instead of an information request. That's the only thing I'd put up there.
Okay, so Kate, if you want that as a motion, that staff be directed to, how do you want to word that? Be directed to assess the fountain for structural stability and recommend any And recommend any,
Potential intervention, we could do a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
does that make sense?
HJAC recommends that staff look into the condition of the fountain and recommend any potential intervention back to the Heritage Committee.
Okay, so I've got Kate as a mover on that. Can I have a seconder for that motion? 2, thank you, Olia. So can I have the clerk read that motion?
Through the chair, I have the motion on the floor is that the HJAC committee recommend to council that staff look into the structural stability of the fountain located at Grimsby Beach and provide any type of intervention tools that may be required and report back to HJAC at a future meeting.
Can you just change that to Bell Park?
Bell Park, no problem.
Right. Or if everyone is good with that motion, all in favor? That's carried. Kate, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Sorry.
I'm not sure if I would add it at this point or if I would just wait, vote, and then add something else. But I also wanted to ask for information about the urns. I know Antonetta had mentioned looking into that at the previous meeting. I went and looked on the same, after I thought boundary trees, I went and looked on the same map, and it appears that most of those urns reside beyond the property line. The ones at 15 Fair look like they belong right, or they are right on the property line. And so I was just curious about that too, if just because I didn't notice it on the agenda, not the agenda, the status report. And I was just wondering if we can, I wrote it down, an information request that staff provide an update on potential strategies and next steps to record, identify, and provide protection for the historic urns and report back to the committee. But after I wrote that, I looked on the map, and it doesn't even, it looks like they are beyond the property lines of those people into the road allowance or into the like just beyond their front. Because I know that some of the people on that right there, they own right to the end of their porch. And and one of the homes that has an urn, their water lines are closer to their home, and the which I believe would be property of town, and the urns reside closer to the road. So it's definitely on town land. So I just wanted to ask about that too.
Antonetta, would that be an information request, or is there an action item there?
Well, I'd like to offer this through you, Chair Bothwell. I think this is why we need to have the priority meetings, because there's just so much. We are going through a backlog of so many years. We've made such significant progress, but we need priorities from the committee, because we cannot do all of this. And so we have not had a chance to look. We prioritized the butternut tree because we thought that might be more fragile and significant. But, you know, I encourage us to have this conversation at the priorities meeting. It's just, there's only so many hours in a day, and you know, our day is on hour 15 or 16 right now. And so it's challenging to get to all those things, and we need to prioritize what we want to really target our attention towards as a committee. And I know it's so hard because it's all important and it all has this great story and it adds to the character of the beach area. So I just encourage us to have that conversation at the priority setting meeting.
Okay, so Kate, are you good with setting that aside until the priority setting meeting, or looking at ways to perhaps incorporate that into the Grimsby Beach land use study? Or
well, I was originally, when I brought it forward, it was to ask that question because that is this something that's going to come up in this land use study, because it hasn't seemed to come up yet. If there are important, monuments or structures that are part of the character of the area. It doesn't, and possibly it will come up. Possibly they're sussing that out themselves. I didn't know. That's how originally this came up, the urns. And And so that's how it moved beyond that. So could it be incorporated into the study? Will it be incorporated in the study? I have no idea.
Can we put on the status report maybe just for information, and that it'll be reviewed and brought back, just so that it doesn't get dropped, and then we can decide on the priority setting if it's something we're going to do or not do, or if it goes in the Grimsby Beach land use study. So it's an item that, you know, it's going to be brought forward to them, or I don't know. Antonetta, how do you think that would be best handled?
Yeah, so I'll say we did share it with our consultants. You know, that said, if the community chooses a heritage conservation district, I could see that being included in a conservation district. Not knowing what tool the community is going to choose or what tools they may choose, their answer in terms of definitive, will the study deal with that, is not sure, because if we choose tree preservation and urban design guidelines, then likely we won't be looking at the urns. So that really will rest in terms of the commitment, the community feedback we get on which tools for Grimsby Beach. But they have been forwarded to the consultant so that it's on their radar. We can add it again to the status sheet so that we can make sure we talk about it at the priority setting. And we did do some research, and we looked and we confirmed that it's not in the town's road allowance, if that helps. I know we looked into it briefly, but again, those are some of the follow-ups actions. So sent it to the consultants. Not sure whether Grimsby Beach is going to tackle it because we don't know what tools the community is going to choose, and we confirmed it wasn't in the road allowance. So let's add it to, if the committee is agreeable, to the status and activity sheet, and we can talk about it during priority setting. I think that's the best we can do for tonight.
Is that okay with you, Kate? That way it gets recorded. We have it. We have a note of it, and then we can follow up with it, whatever vehicle we end up with down the road. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Was there anything else? I just want to make sure I didn't cut you off with anything else, Kate, and then I'll move on the status report. Anyone else have anything else on the status report? Any other comments? I appreciate all the work Bianca does putting this together, and it's an extremely helpful document. So I really, really appreciate it. I don't mean to be critical, but if there's any way you can add just a little bit more date information, like for instance, showing the updated date that the designation reports went to council, or that, like, so they went to council December 21st, January 11th, the notice to designate was issued, published January 28th, and the appeal period ended February 26th, so that we know when you say preparing appeal package, we have a bit of a grasp of the timeline of just when it was, even just when it went to council for the designation. It just might make it a little easier to track back. It's just similar to the referred matters list that the clerk uses for council. She actually uses hyperlinks back to the council meeting where it was discussed. So even a hyperlink back to the council meeting where that item was discussed in the status report just might help tracking if we want to go back and say, oh, when did that go to council? It would help us with that reference date. That's all. So other than that, thank you. That's very, very helpful again. And I appreciate all the work, and I know it's just one more thing on your plate to do. So thanks for that. I have a motion, excuse me, resolve that the updated status and activity report be received. I'm going to say as amended, because we're adding the urns to it. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? I've got Kate and I've got Councillor Dunstall. Thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we dealt with correspondence. We'd moved it up, which was the urban design for Century Condos. I'm just going to now, we added announcements to the agenda in case anyone had anything further that they just wanted to bring awareness to the community or bring attention to. If there's anyone that has anything further to add, well, this is your opportunity to speak about any good news. The birdhouses, Kate, great, you know, Grimsby Beach did a great effort there in building those awesome replica Grimsby Beach home birdhouses that flew out of the coop basically off your hands, and you raised, I think, $1,200 or something for, was that for Carolinian tree planting? Can you just remind me what that was for?
So over the winter months, a number of us in the area built and I wheeled them around in snow to children, and they painted it in the paint colors that we have in our neighborhood. People donated the paint, the supplies, and some of it coming from our cottages. And we raised $1,200, and we raised the money. It was we knew that things were moving forward with the Carolinian trees, and that's something that comes up in Grimsby Beach. We're a lot of tree lovers there, and we wanted to push it forward in a gentle, positive way, and get the kids involved. And what we plan on doing is we want to purchase right now, actually, another group of citizens in the town in Grimsby Beach have actually started a tree inventory, an extensive tree inventory. We wanted this to be part of the study, and it's supposed to be part of the study, but we just wanted to make sure and move forward in it. It's extensive, crazy extensive. And so we wanted to see what was missing, what we had lost, what was missing. And we wanted to, and $1,200 does not go very far. But we wanted to really get the kids involved and the residents involved to take ownership and to use this as an educational process. And we plan on selecting after we finalize this inventory, a few trees, hopefully a few butternuts, and try to establish them on private property or potentially public property if we can work with the town, mainly so they'll dig the holes for us. And dedicate them to the kids, dedicate them under the name of some of the children that helped paint, so that they can take more ownership and really consider that they were their trees, and they could do something very simple and positive to make some change, and so that for our future of this town. So we just wanted a real positive during a very difficult time with COVID, to do something positive and make people feel powerful and connect us all together. So that's what that was.
Thanks, Kate. So, and I know the heritage aspect of that is you're dealing with the Carolinian and the heritage trees within Grimsby, and that's the focus of this fundraiser, was to help and continue that thought. So appreciate that. Anybody else have anything heritage related for an announcement? Seeing none, our next meeting, the next Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee meeting is scheduled for May 11th, 2021 at 6:00 p.m. and will be available again through electronic participation. And that's it for tonight. So if there's no further items or business, this meeting is adjourned. So thank you everyone for your time.
Councillor Bothwell, I have a quick question.